Chapter 55. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Jumping down from the secret passage, Xie Junping looked up. The camouflage film blocked his line of sight perfectly, making him look like a piece of alloy steel. Who would have thought that there was a short and narrow secret passage that led to this strange tree-hole space? Luonan didn't say a word. He silently made his way back. Xie Junping glanced at the surveillance screen once more. He hurried 2 steps to walk shoulder to shoulder with Luonan. But soon, he regretted his decision. At this time, all the system modules in the laboratory had returned to normal. When they returned, it was no longer dark. Inside the glass wall, under the special black light, the dark purple light made this area of water look dreamy and illusory. But to Xie Junping, this long and tedious road was simply torture. The mental state of Luonan next to her was abnormal. Along the way, Luonan continued the oppressive and impatient state he had in the tree hole. He was constantly spinning in circles in his own thoughts. Sometimes, he would stop abruptly and turn his head to look at the long corridor behind him, as well as the increasingly gloomy waters beside him. He would be in a daze for a long time. Every time this happened, the blood-red color in his eyes would be bright and glistening, making it hard for others to look at him directly. There were even several times when Xie Junping could hear the sound of his teeth clenching. After walking and stopping for a few minutes, Xie Junping became even more certain. Luonan was about to go crazy. He didn't doubt in the slightest that if someone dared to say, "I'm the person who lives in the tree hole," right now, Luonan would immediately pounce over and tear that person's throat to shreds. Then he would roar and interrogate, "What the hell are you doing over there?" What was he thinking? If this continued, Xie Junping felt that he would go crazy. Something had to be done. Xie Junping racked his brains to recall some of the communication classes he had attended. He tried to think of a way to express himself. After hesitating for a while, he finally said, "Junior brother, do you know very little about Auntie?" Luonan was clearly stupefied. His circle of self had been broken, and this power came from the nostalgia he had for his mother. This wondrous emotion was like a surging river that washed over his heart. It was slightly painful, but it wasn't bad. A long time passed before Luonan nodded. "Yes, very few. There's a way." Xie Junping was overjoyed and continued, "Auntie doesn't have any relatives?" Luonan continued to respond, "My mother was a war orphan. She grew up in an orphanage." Xie Junping almost choked, but after calculating the time, Bo Qingwen was indeed born before the Third World War. There were many such situations in that generation. No matter what, the conversation had finally begun. "Is it in the local area? If you want to gather more information, Junior, I have some power in Xia City." Xie Junping took charge again, and the results were actually pretty good. Luonan bowed towards him. "Thank you, Senior." Here it comes again. She felt that Luonan was like a person from the previous century. Or perhaps he acted completely according to the patterns of the books. Yet, perhaps this was the case. It was just that his cold face matched well with his actions, giving people the illusion that he was relatively mature. Thinking of this, Xie Junping was even more confident about this exchange. He waved his hand and said, "Actually, I really admire Auntie. To be able to single-handedly design gear, and even after more than 20 years, people are still fighting over it. I even thought it was the masterpiece of some great master. This is also the first time I've heard of it." "Then, Brother Nan, what did you know before? Didn't your family mention anything about Auntie?" The sudden silence nearly made Xie Junping think that he had outsmarted himself. But in the end Luonan still opened his mouth. "Mom passed away before I was born. You said it before." Hold on. Why did these words sound a bit strange? Before Xie Junping could think it through, he heard Luonan speak. Mom and him met at Acumen College. They went together to the wilderness and met up with my grandfather. At the time, my aunt had a terrible relationship with them. She knew very little. Luo Nan's words were a bit incoherent, and there were some subtle references. Xie Junping was able to understand after combining the information he had gathered before. Luo Nan's parents probably met and fell in love while studying at Acumen College. They went together to the wilderness to assist Luo Nan's grandfather in his research. And at the time, Luo Nan's current guardian, his aunt, didn't have a good relationship with his family. She didn't know much about the relevant circumstances. It was naturally hard for Luo Nan to obtain relevant information about his mother when his grandfather was insane and his father was missing. Luo Nan subconsciously reached out his hand as he spoke. His fingertips made contact with the glass wall, emitting a muffled sound of friction. I only knew one thing about my mother since I was young. She passed away before I was born. It was these words again, and a strange feeling emerged once more. Xie Junping pondered back and forth twice before he finally realized what the problem was. How could she have given birth to a child when she was already dead? He had heard that in the past, when medical conditions were relatively backward, there were cases of misfortune and dystocia. The mother had already passed away, but the child was still preserved. Luo Nan was probably like this? Xie Junping believed that he had understood the crux of the matter. He was just about to continue the topic when he saw Luo Nan pull out a highlighter pen from his black notebook. He drew an oval-shaped cabinet on the glass wall. A slender silhouette of a person sat next to it. The lines of the drawing were simple to the extreme, but the content expressed was extremely straightforward and clear. "This is my mother." Luo Nan's voice was strangely gentle. "I've never seen her with my own eyes, but I've heard people say that this is how she gave birth to me." Xie Junping was a bit confused. It said that it was June 80. I was 7 months old. I was in my mother's stomach. The base was in chaos, and my mother was heavily injured. She sealed off the laboratory and used the only health pod inside to save me. "Look, I'm here." Luo Nan drew a small circle on the oval, which was the center of the health pod. Xie Junping opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Actually, he originally wanted to ask how a fetus was placed in the health pod inside the stomach. But when the words reached the tip of his tongue, he suddenly understood the tragic process. He was stupefied in place all of a sudden. Luo Nan lightly pressed the edge of the silhouette. His tone was still so gentle that it was frightening. "I can't see her, but she's always been here. This is my mother." Xie Junping looked stupidly at the fluorescent lines. He didn't know how to respond for a time. Luo Nan walked forward and changed to a different area. He drew a few more lines, borrowing the illumination of the black light to form an oppressive shadow. At the front of the shadow was a prison-like structure. A person sat upright inside, and next to him was a small figure. 3 years later, my grandfather was sued, imprisoned, and went crazy. The laboratory was gone, the experimental materials were gone, and the research results were gone. At this time, a certain someone was gone as well. Luo Nan gave Xie Junping a strange smile. "He should be here, but he's not. This is my father." They just happened to walk to the starting point of the underwater corridor at this time. Luo Nan put away the fluorescent pen and bowed towards Xie Junping once more. "I just said some senseless words. I've troubled you, senior." Clearly, Luo Nan understood Xie Junping's thoughts. Conversely, Xie Junping was finally able to peek into a corner of Luo Nan's tortuous and gloomy inner world. Moreover, Luo Nan's emotions were clearly much calmer. This could be considered a contribution. Xie Junping let out a secret breath. Right when he was about to respond, the voices of people came from not too far away. 7 or 8 people crowded into the surrounding resting area of the underwater corridor. Some people even greeted Xie Junping. "Brother Ping, we're here." Chapter 56. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? SpeakNet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Junping frowned as he looked over. Hu Huaying of the Student Council was among the people who came. He was also Hu San'er. He could be considered Xie Jinping's best friend and ally. He was the one who greeted Xie Jinping. In addition, there were two unfamiliar faces. The other four people were the upper echelons of the construction society. Even the society's president, Lang Ding, had come. Xie Jinping suddenly had an ominous premonition when he saw this situation. Xie Jinping grumbled in his heart, but he still put on a smiling face and went forward to greet them. This kind of social work was his forte. Moreover, he didn't need to face Luonan for the time being. He immediately felt the world open up to him. He could do as he pleased, returning from the hellish difficulty to the novice setting. Even though there were 7 people in front of him, he was still able to greet them with familiarity without the slightest bit of confusion. He also inquired clearly about the identities of the 2 unfamiliar people. One was a lawyer with the surname Zhu. He was the financial backers' representative. His attitude was calm and indifferent. He had the aloof demeanor of a society elite. The other was a bodyguard. He had a dark skin and a swift and fierce body. He had a rather cool professional appearance. He ignored everyone. Both of them were people who had been working hard in society, and their ages were much older than the students present. It was reasonable to say that the school's society work office should send out a corresponding person to receive them in this kind of situation. Or perhaps a teacher consultant of the relevant society should come forward. But Xie Jinping didn't see any of these. Xie Jinping felt that something was wrong more and more. Soon, his premonition became reality. While he was exchanging pleasantries with lawyer Zhu, he directly said, "The Rainbow Fund is quite satisfied with the Construction Society's development plan and personnel composition. They are willing to carry out a more practical cooperation. Injecting capital to purchase a landmark building on the North Bank is also a pretty good investment. I hope to obtain the cooperation of the school and the student council in the relevant procedures and arrangements." Xie Jinping laughed it off, but he had cursed Hu San'er 1,000 times in his heart. You can't even explain this kind of thing clearly. It's true that the new financial backer has arrived, but he's not directly entering the scene and starting from scratch. He's here to assist the construction society. Damn. I originally thought that the Twin Dragons Society was going to become the Three Kingdom Kill. But looking at the situation, it was clearly one-sided. He grinned. When he shook hands with Lang Ding, he said, "I won't mention anything else, but I have to say that I'm impressed by the Construction Society's ability to attract sponsors." As the chairman of a large society, Lang Ding was not a particularly domineering person. At this moment, he only smiled. "It's fine. Bringing in a new investor will make the society's capital structure more reasonable, and it will be easier to manage. Good luck." Xie Jinping laughed and laughed, but in his heart, he screamed, "Trouble!" He turned his head to glance at Luonan. This master still had a downcast appearance. He didn't care about the group of uninvited guests at all. Indeed, according to Luonan's logic, as long as he was in the Order Club, within the building that his mother had designed, it didn't matter who took control of this place in the end. My lord, how could it be that easy? Xie Jinping cursed inwardly, feeling a headache coming on. Whether it was the Construction Society or the Mystic Arts Research Society, none of these large-scale societies were easy to deal with. If you didn't do your job well beforehand, a small club member would have plenty of ways to make you lose your job. The reason why Xie Jinping dared to guarantee Luonan before was because he had already given the Mystic Arts Research Society a heads-up. The road ahead and the road behind were completely paved. As for the Construction Society, it really wasn't easy to handle. Lang Ding was easy to talk to, but the structure of this society was quite complicated. There were many thorns in the executive committee. Let's not talk about other things. That damn dog Li Xueqing was the vice president of the Construction Society. He possessed a lot of influence within the society. If Luo Nan really entered the construction society and bumped into Li Xueqing, wouldn't a mysterious campus death case occur? He had to think of a plan when he got back. Xie Junping didn't have the mood to stay any longer when his thoughts reached this point. He spoke a few more words of nonsense and pulled Luo Nan to leave. But who knew that Lawyer Zhu of the Rainbow Fund would call him to a stop after just a few steps? Head Xie, there's something I need to consult you about. Xie Junping was the head of the Society Activities Department of the Student Council, but there were very few people who directly addressed him by his title on campus. He was stunned for a moment before turning his head and putting on a smiling face. Lawyer Zhu, please don't hesitate to ask. Lawyer Zhu nodded slightly. It's related to the assets of the society. From the looks of things, the Order Club has already entered a state of idleness, and it will take at least 3 months to half a year to complete the procedures. This is quite unfavorable for preserving the value of the existing asset. Therefore, we suggest that we contact the competing society and hold a coordination meeting. We will officially count and seal all of the assets of the Order Club to reduce depreciation losses and avoid additional consumption. We hope that the Student Council will be able to coordinate and organize in the middle to complete the relevant procedures as soon as possible. Xie Junping's brows furrowed. If you seal off the society, where will the master next to me go? Lawyer Zhu spoke without waiting for a response. In addition, we also hope that the school can conduct a strict examination of the procedures. We just paid attention to the Order Club's society website and discovered that a new member has actually entered the society. Can the society still recruit members during this period of lockdown? We need an explanation for the reason for joining the society during the auction of the society asset. F***CK. This guy was specifically looking for trouble. Xie Junping's face darkened in an instant. At the same time, he found it very strange. He didn't remember offending the Rainbow Fund or this litigator surnamed Zhu. Logically speaking, the Rainbow Fund was a very famous investment fund in Xia City. There was no need to be so stingy, right? He shot a glance at Luo Nan. Luo Nan had clearly heard Lawyer Zhu's words. He had already raised his head, but his gaze wasn't directed at the spokesperson. Instead, it fell onto the body of the dark-skinned bodyguard by Lawyer Zhu's side. Something was wrong. Although Xie Junping didn't understand what was going on, he definitely wouldn't budge an inch on this matter. He replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lawyer Zhu might not know, but according to the school's procedures, the Order Club hasn't been dissolved yet. It's only managed by the school's student council. Its main function is still to maintain the club's normal operations. Recruiting members is also within reason. Lawyer Zhu smiled. All of the original members of the society have entered the detention process. It's hard to believe that the society can still operate normally. Otherwise, the school wouldn't have launched an asset auction. Based on the escrow agreement, our understanding is that the so-called escrow should be in a situation where the society has substantially disappeared, so as to fully realize the preservation of assets. If Minister Xie thinks that our understanding is wrong, we can also convene a coordination meeting to consult the opinions of other bidders, and we can choose the greatest common divisor. Xie Junping was slightly stunned. He really didn't have the guts to hold that coordination meeting. Lawyer Zhu's gaze shifted to fall on Luo Nan's face, but then he quickly exchanged glances with the dark-skinned bodyguard by his side. The latter nodded slightly before speaking. So this is the student Luo Nan who just joined the club? I just saw the announcement of your joining the club on the website. I'll take the liberty to ask, what's your reason for joining the club? Did you go through the relevant investigations? Did you have an understanding of the Order Club's circumstances before joining the club? Luo Nan held his notebook in his arms when faced with this interrogation. He was cold and quiet, not uttering a single word. But Xie Junping couldn't bear to watch. He shouted, "Hey, hey, hey! That's 3 sentences already. If you want a reason, ask me." Who knows better than me? Chapter 57. Genius 1 Second Remember if you want to go? Speak Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Jinping shifted the focus of the conflict back to himself, but in his opinion, perhaps he had saved Lawyer Zhu's life. When he thought of this, he felt a sense of superiority from a higher position. Lawyer Zhu, if you say that the Order Club continues to operate and recruit new members is a loss of resources, then I won't admit it. Do we students eat pig's feed? Husan, the Order Club's qualifications to recruit new members have just been restored in the new semester, right? Hu Huaying was a bit dizzy from the sudden intensification of the conflict. Xie Jinping had already dragged him into the water, and their many years of alliance hadn't been in vain. He immediately nodded. It was restored on September 1st. Xie Jinping was fully aware that this was a sign of a lag in the execution process, but he treated it as evidence and threw it at Lawyer Zhu's face. Perhaps Lawyer Zhu doesn't understand the internal situation of the school, so I might as well inform you. In the past few years, the Order Club has been courting disaster. Aside from last year's financial problems, there was also an experimental accident in 1993, and their membership qualifications were revoked. But this qualification was officially restored on September 1st this year. What does this mean? It means that the school still hopes to give the Order Club a chance, to let this old club that has existed since the school's founding preserve a bit of its mark. Even if it can't escape the fate of merging in the end, it won't completely disappear. At least there's still a legacy. Xie Jinping originally didn't believe these absurd words, but the more he spoke, the more excited he became. He was even a bit moved, because at this moment, he suddenly thought of Bo Qingwen. He thought of this talented female senior who single-handedly designed gear. After leaving behind her iconic work, she left for the distant wilderness, and then perished in such a tragic and stirring manner. A club that once possessed such an outstanding person had to leave something behind, to let people remember something. He was doing exactly this. And so, Xie Jinping's voice grew louder and louder. A newcomer makes an application and the club approves it. Isn't that normal? I see that this student's application is sincere, and his reason is sufficient. He himself is also very outstanding. What's wrong with allowing him to join the club during the escrow period? Lawyer Zhu had seen this type of expression where emotions were greater than reason many times. Young people always like to be like this. He smiled and shook his head. Reason sufficient? Can you tell me the specifics? If it was before, Xie Jinping might have encountered awkwardness, but today was different. He laughed heartily. Of course it's sufficient, it's sufficient. He directly pulled out the blueprint from the Society's database and showed it to everyone through the projection equipment nearby. Gear, which is also the building we are in, was designed by our school's Architectural Design Institute's 72 PhD student, Ms. Bo Qingwen. The final construction was completed. This is the relevant electronic file, including Ms. Bo's personal signature. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Lawyer Zhu? Lawyer Zhu felt that something was amiss. He withdrew his smile and frowned. Xie Jinping's heart skipped a beat when the black-faced bodyguard beside him glared at him coldly. This guy didn't look like a bodyguard, but more like an armed gangster. However, under the push of unprecedented emotions, Xie Jinping quickly roused his spirit and boldly said, "Just by relying on this one work, gear, Ms. Bo Qingwen is the pride of our school. Unfortunately, Lady Bu passed away 6 years after completing this work. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of her talent. After that, Gear's personnel changed, and no one remembered that stunning senior sister from back then. Until today." Xie Jinping walked with large strides to Luonan's side. He draped his arm over Luonan's shoulder. Until today. Lady Bu's only son, student Luonan, has followed in his mother's footsteps and entered Acumen College to study. After a month of searching, he found his mother's work from back then. but he witnessed the decline of the Order Club and the lack of maintenance on gear. He was heartbroken and took the initiative to join the society, to contribute all of his strength, to let this legendary building radiate its splendor once more. Is this reason enough? Luonan shot a glance at the palm on his shoulder, but he didn't say anything in the end. The most difficult person to please didn't have any objections. Xie Juanping's imposing manner rose with the tide. Junior Lang, Lawyer Zhu. Even though we know that the Order Club is likely to become history, Lady Bu's contributions to the school and student Luonan's contributions to his mother's honor should receive the school's support and encouragement. Even though this is my personal opinion, I'll say it here. If you have any objections, you can doubt it. Suing is no problem. Suing the Student Council, the Alumni Association, the Parent Conference, the President's Office, and the Board of Directors is no exception. What's fake can't be real. What's real can't be fake. I really want to see who was able to sever the flesh and blood of Lady Bu and Junior Luonan, who was able to destroy the mother-son affection between them, who was able to trample the cultural inheritance of our school into the ground and ruin it? Xie Juanping's imposing manner right now was truly earth-shattering. He glared and pointed at the irrelevant people. Junior Lang? Lang Ding smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He didn't want to clash with Xie Juanping. Xie Juanping looked at the most talkative person, Lawyer Zhu. Lawyer Zhu's face turned a bit green. He didn't respond immediately. It seemed that he was preparing his words. How could Xie Juanping give him the chance? Right now his heart was carefree, indescribable with words. In the end, he just laughed out loud, put his arm around Luonan's shoulder, and swaggered off. This was an unprecedented victory. Xie Juanping's eyes were practically brimming with hot tears before he had even walked a few steps. This was the first time he didn't look at the teleprompter. He didn't use his built-in earphones to give a passionate speech, okay? The effects were simply explosive. It was a pity. It was a pity that he wasn't able to record it. He wouldn't be able to recollect it in the future. Hold on. Perhaps there was a way. Xie Juanping turned his head and asked, Junior Nan. My image this time. Give me a drawing. Sorry. Only now did Xie Juanping discover that he had forgotten himself in his excitement just now. He was still holding Luonan's arm and hadn't let go yet. Xie Juanping immediately shrunk his neck and hastily pulled his hand back when this old man's cold gaze swept over him. Who knew that Luonan would give him a thumbs up in the next moment? Senior, you're eloquent. Xie Juanping coughed. He wanted to be a bit reserved. I've seen this bunch of litigators many times. It's Auntie and Junior Nan who gave me the confidence. In the end, he couldn't help but grin and laugh loudly. He couldn't control his mouth in the end. Speaking of which, Junior Nan, just give me a drawing. It'd be a pity if you didn't keep it as a souvenir. Luonan actually didn't refuse. He just said, I'll go buy a flexible screen first. Xie Juanping didn't expect Luonan to respond. He suddenly received this kind of response. He was stunned for a moment before becoming overjoyed. Actually, a portrait didn't count for much. But this represented that his friendship with Luonan had truly entered a new stage. He immediately slapped his chest. I'll buy this. No need. Thanks. Luonan laughed, but he quickly restrained himself. He lowered his head and flipped open the notebook. He went to the page of the flexible e-ink screen and looked at the cracked screen. A moment later, he opened the metal ring and removed the flexible e-ink screen. He weighed it in his hand and suddenly assumed a posture of wanting to throw it. Xie Juanping was shocked to the side. He instinctively went to grab Luonan's arm. But who knew that Luonan himself would stop before he could exert his strength? He faced Xie Juanping with a smile. Destroying hygiene isn't too good, right? Xie Juanping fiercely nodded his head no matter what kind of craziness Luonan was having. He was fully aware of how Li Xueqing had turned into a dead dog. So he could guess the importance of this flexible e-ink screen to Luonan. He couldn't help but worry that Luo Nan would make a choice that he would regret in the future due to his momentary emotions. If Luo Nan could figure it out by himself, then that would be for the best. Luo Nan muttered to himself for a moment. In the end, he placed the flexible e-ink screen back into the notebook and continued to walk forward. It was as if nothing had happened. Chapter 58. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Xie Juanping's luxury car sped along the high-speed magnetic track. For a rich kid like him, a phantom being sealed was just an opportunity for the other collections in the garage to show themselves. Xia City had already entered the darkness of night outside the car window. It was rush hour, but the city was rarely congested. Over the past few decades, billions of tons of soil, steel, and other special materials had been used to build the magnificent metropolis according to the will of mankind. More than 200 million people were crammed into the limited land. But it could still operate efficiently. Just like transportation. From the ground to the sky, Xia City was divided into 20 layers of transportation. They were divided into hundreds of millions of different types of transportation. Even when the traffic was the most dense, it only took about 20 minutes to cover the 40 kilometers. Xie Juanping volunteered to take Luo Nan home, so Luo Nan was happy and relaxed. He seized this time to familiarize himself with the newly purchased flexible e-ink screen, mainly the feel of the screen and the electronic pen. As for the other configurations, they were meaningless. When the external neuron seeped into it and connected to the battery module, the familiar interface that hadn't changed for 5 years appeared in front of him. However, the gear icon that still existed in the laboratory was nowhere to be seen, indicating that the special hardware and software foundation still had a certain impact on the external neuron. Luo Nan's finger stroked the original gear icon twice. Then he opened the drawing software he hadn't used in a long time. At the top of the software interface was still the image of the burning wraith, and it still looked as malevolent and terrifying as before. But after experiencing the concise and abstract lines of the wraith sign, Luo Nan felt that this sketch was truly unbearable to look at. There were many mistakes and awkwardness. Shaking his head, he directly deleted the magical sketch and replaced it with the one that depicted the entrance of the nightclub. Hey, delete this one as well. Change it to something prettier. Xie Juanping just so happened to turn his head at this time. He only saw Luo Nan delete a picture, but he was unable to see the content clearly. Love go small say netko. However, he was very clear about what was going to happen next, so he immediately shouted. Luo Nan cast a glance at him and said in a lukewarm tone, "Pay attention to your driving. This is a high-speed magnetic track. How am I supposed to drive it?" Xie Juanping put his hand on the steering wheel, but he received a warning from the car's AI, telling him to enter the conversion zone before adjusting the magnetic track to avoid a rear-end collision. Xie Juanping had an innocent expression on his face. Luo Nan was disinclined to pay attention to him. He created a blank page on the drawing software and immediately put pen to paper. Xie Juanping drew close with a whoosh. He saw Luo Nan use the digital pen to draw out the blurry shadows of the background. It was vaguely the internal layout of gear. Xie Juanping was excited when he suddenly became stupefied. Who is he? That dark-skinned bodyguard? Why did you draw him? I've seen it before. Luo Nan sketched out the outline of the dark-faced bodyguard. He wanted to add a few fine strokes, but he was a bit hesitant. For him, this was a rather rare situation. Xie Juanping was still a little unconvinced. Who is he? I saw it on the ship Lanshan yesterday. It's probably Quantum Corporation's. Burner. Xie Juanping's chin smashed into his own shoulder. It should be. Back on the warship, it was this dark-faced man who dragged Quantum Corporation's deep blue walker armor. He drove past Luo Nan's side. The two of them made eye contact, and the dark-faced man even sealed his outer armor with a membrane, as if he was guarding against a thief. The process could not be considered pleasant. Xie Junping was drenched in cold sweat. It seemed that he had clashed with the dark-faced man's gaze when he was passionately giving his speech. If the dark-faced man were to slap him, his recently upgraded mouth would probably shatter into pieces. In comparison, Quantum Corporation's deterrent power wasn't as direct. Luonan just shook his head at Xie Junping's performance. He flipped over the page and put his pen to paper once more. This time it really was Xie Junping's image. Even though it was clearly a gift, Luonan didn't deliberately add more ink. It was the same as before, a few strokes, and the image appeared clearly. This person had his arm around Xie Junping's shoulder while waving his arm. He seemed excited, angry, and a bit crazy. But the arm around Xie Junping's neck and the shadow on his flank made this somewhat out-of-control action turn into a somewhat upright and unyielding guardian. Xie Junping was still yelling, "How could I be this crazy?" But after seeing the overall composition, he became happier the more he looked. This continued until he was grinning from ear to ear. He was satisfied to the extreme. In the end, there was only one point of dissatisfaction. "That's you on the side, right? Why didn't you draw it?" "I'm not good at self-portraits," Luonan responded simply and immediately sent this picture over. He didn't care what Xie Junping did with it. And then Luonan selected the two new sketches he had drawn as well as the ones he had accumulated before. He pressed on the screen for a few seconds and the second layer of the drawing software opened up. It was the true appearance. He had tried it yesterday in the confinement room of the warship and failed. Today he switched to a different machine and everything went smoothly. The main body of the second layer was the tetrahedron on the title page of his grandfather's notebook. It was just that it didn't have an inscribed sphere or an outerscribed sphere. Instead, it was divided into 5 roughly equal layers. It rotated within the gray background. Xie Junping's gaze shifted over. He was a bit curious. Maslow? This interface really did look very close to the diagram of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This theory arranged a person's needs from low to high, from basic to complex. It was like a staircase that was arranged into 5 layers. As long as one had a bit of common sense in sociology and psychology, they wouldn't be unfamiliar with this classical theory and related diagram from the last century. Xie Junping pointed and said, "From bottom to top. Physiology, safety, social interaction, respect, and self-realization? It's students, employees, technicians, clergymen, and politicians. So vulgar. I'm saying that these occupations can be arranged in a staircase?" Luonan didn't explain. Right now he had selected a dozen or so sketches, and they all moved into the enclosed space of the tetrahedron. There were at least several hundred similar artworks scattered within. Within the enclosed space, all the sketches were scaled down. They began to flip up and down as new sketches entered. It looked like a marvelous card set that was repeatedly shuffled and rearranged under the drive of the software. Several seconds later, the positions of the several hundred artworks within the card shuffling machine were determined. The vast majority of them were arranged in the bottom 2 layers. Occasionally there was a third layer, but the 4th and 5th layers were all blank. "I can play with them like tarot cards? A fortune teller? Which company made this software?" Xie Junping was attracted by the marvelous changes in the interface. His mind was filled with questions. At the same time, he opened his eyes wide and strove to find his own image. "It's my father's work." Xie Junping immediately became honest. He roughly understood Luonan's temperament now. He knew that Luonan wouldn't be in a good mood as long as it was related to his father. Luonan was much quieter for the rest of the journey. The flying car arrived at Blue Bay Community at approximately 7:15. This was a bit later than the usual time to get home. Luonan bid farewell to Xie Junping and walked into the community. Soon a scratching noise rang above his head. The familiar rhythm indicated that it was ink greeting him. Luonan didn't raise his head as he walked into the apartment building's elevator. He opened his notebook after choosing his floor and stared at the flexible e-ink screen. He stared blankly at the special interface of the second floor. Then he sneered. That coward would forever shrink his head and tail even though he was declaring his existence. The drawing software was like this. The external neuron was like this. The tree-hole space. Was it like this? Luonan didn't know, but the burning pain in his heart could not be clearer. The elevator reached the floor and the metal door opened. Luonan closed his notebook with a bang and walked out with large strides. The home AI sensed his existence and opened the front door after confirming it. Luonan stepped inside, but he was slightly startled. The lights in the living room were on. A middle-aged lady was sitting on the sofa, handling business through her wristband. She raised her head when she heard the door open. She looked straight at him with an expressionless face. Chapter 59. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luonan immediately stood at attention. Aunt, the middle-aged lady on the sofa, was Luonan's aunt, Luo Shuqing. She was small and thin, with a plain face and a quiet and serious temperament. Luonan hung his head as usual in front of this elder. Auntie, you came from so far away? There's someone who just won't budge no matter how much I ask. So, I came over to pay my respects. Mrs. Luo Shuqing's poisonous tongue was as sharp as ever. It immediately made Luonan speechless. It was only then that he realized why it was so easy to pass the inspection last night. His aunt had probably already made up her mind to come here for a surprise inspection. Well, that was my aunt's style. Luo Shuqing looked at her watch and stood up. Let's go. Your uncle has already prepared dinner and is waiting for us. She didn't give Luonan any chance to object. Luonan still wanted to struggle a bit. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Since you know it's troublesome, don't go looking for trouble. Luo Shuqing walked to Luonan's side. She was a head shorter than her skinny nephew, but her imposing manner was a head higher. These are extraordinary times. You're extremely daring. You live in a high-rise apartment and aren't afraid of the building collapsing. But your uncle and I are old. We're scared witless. We're counting on you to go back and look after us. Luonan gaped, but he discovered that he didn't have the strength to argue. He really didn't have the strength. He had been working non-stop for 40 hours, and he hadn't closed his eyes once during this time. He faced the burning wraith, the burner, the ability users, and the secrets of the external neuron and gear. Countless information poured in and burst forth, and there was also the intense washing of emotions due to his mother and coward. He had practically overdrafted all of his energy. At this moment, he felt as if he had just returned home after a long and arduous march. Then, in the face of his aunt, who had always treated him as her own daughter, in the face of a rare family member who could completely relax, why should he argue and torment himself? In a moment of stupefaction, Luo Shuqing had already forcefully pulled Luonan's shoulder to face the door. Everyone, time is precious. Let's go. The familiar, unyielding, and affectionate action made the corner of Luonan's mouth twitch. He wanted to reveal a smile and announce his failure in front of his aunt. This was his usual routine, and it was what made his aunt most proud of him. Love go small say, net chew, but halfway through. He couldn't go any further. Because at this moment, the fatigue, hardship, pressure, and most importantly, the uncontrollable complex emotions that had accumulated over the past 2 days all rushed to his head, roaring as he searched for an opportunity to vent them. It seemed that any slight tug on the facial nerves would cause the fragile dam to collapse, and everything would flow out. There was an instant when Luonan even wanted to drag his aunt back to school. He wanted to point out gear and the tree hole for her to see. He wanted to ask her if she felt the same way he did. However, when he thought about how his aunt knew almost nothing about his mother, this impulse disappeared. Some things were destined to be shouldered by oneself. No one would be able to fully accept and understand your feelings. The fact that he was able to tell Xie Junping so much today was already a sign of him losing control of his emotions. It would be difficult for him to do so again. 100 thoughts crossed Luonan's mind. In the end, Luonan just slightly raised his head to avoid letting his aunt see the sorry appearance of him losing control of his facial expression. But how to resolve this extremely unnatural movement was beyond his ability. Just as he was feeling awkward, his wristband vibrated. Luonan turned around in practically an instant, his back facing his aunt. He took a deep breath before connecting to his wristband. A half-familiar yet half-familiar voice immediately transmitted over. "Hey handsome, wanna meet?" "What's up?" Luonan already saw that it was Zhang Yingying's number. He didn't have the strength to tangle with this overly lively woman with words, but the hoarseness of his voice shocked him the instant he opened his mouth. Afraid that his aunt would hear something strange, Luonan walked a few steps into the house. Zhang Yingying was quite sharp. She could hear that Luonan's state was a bit off. She asked curiously, "Are you sleeping? Where are you?" Luonan adjusted his voice and did his best to use short and clear words. "At home." "Okay. I think so too. But your heart is quite big. You haven't received a notice of the entrance exam all day. You don't even know to call and ask?" How could Luonan say that he had completely forgotten about this matter? "I give it to you. Where did the initiative of the job seeker this morning go? I still remember even now. Teacher, I want to be a staff member." The young girl pinched her throat, fabricating words that Luonan had never said before. Luonan actually laughed. Far too many things had happened today. From Luonan's perspective, each matter was heavier than the last. His thoughts had already been forced into a very narrow region. Zhang Yingying's jesting brought it up made his mind much clearer. The Professional Ability User Society. Okay, the Explorers Society was a platform that he had to fight for no matter what. Right now he didn't have the extra strength to go and think about things that had already happened. He didn't have any hope of becoming emotional and fretful. He asked, "It's starting?" Hurry back right now. Your main examiner is about to arrive at the large living area outside of Acumen College, the Limestone Water Village pub. I'll explain the specifics to you when you arrive. I feel that your chance has come. Limestone Water Village pub? Could this call have come 20 minutes earlier? Luonan was speechless for a time, but he didn't say much. After all, this phone call gave him an excellent reason. He hung up and his mood more or less calmed down. He turned around and wanted to speak to his aunt. But he never expected to meet Mrs. Luo Shuqing's curious gaze. "You're going out?" "Ah yes." "A date?" "No." Luonan immediately shrunk back. "Then what is it?" Luo Shuqing didn't let him off. It's a gathering." "A gathering? Limestone Water Village pub? I remember that it's near your school. Why don't you just go there?" "Didn't I forget?" Luonan was struggling to deal with this when he suddenly remembered something. It seemed that Shuelei's girlfriend had mentioned this afternoon. He operated his wristband on the spot and sure enough, he received an invitation from the Acumen Mutual Assistance Association in his mailbox. Coincidentally, the Acumen Mutual Assistance Association's gathering location was also the Limestone Water Village pub. Of course, the meeting time had already passed, but it didn't affect him taking the blame. Luonan showed the email to his aunt. "This is the school's Mutual Assistance Association activity. It's a very formal cold dinner party." Mutual Assistance Association. Why are you interested in it? Luo Shuqing understood her child's temperament the best. With his introverted and autistic personality, how could he be interested in this kind of social gathering? Luonan took out a ready-made reason. The school's societies are very exclusive. It would be very troublesome without a senior to lead the way. I still haven't joined a society yet. I'm afraid of getting my points deducted, so... You didn't pass the Mystic Arts Research Society test. Yeah. Did you take the initiative to go to the Mutual Assistance Association? No, they came to find me. Luo Shuqing finally believed him when she saw her nephew's introverted and immature expression. She shook her head. Acumen College is getting worse with each batch. If you knew this earlier, why did you set your mind on getting in? Luonan was silent. Luo Shuqing still wanted to say more, but she suddenly saw Luonan's thin figure standing in the room. Behind him was the familiar apartment furnishings. She was in a trance, as if she had gone back in time 20 years ago. He was also a young man, and he was smiling at her. Her heart ached slightly. When she looked again, that high-spirited smile had already been replaced by her nephew's stiff and dull face. Silence and oppression accumulated in the doorway. Luonan thought that his reason had failed, but his face went slightly cold. It was his aunt's palm. She lightly patted him. Then go tidy up a bit. The handsome boy of the Luo family can't be looked down upon. Chapter 60. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luonan raised his head in astonishment and met his aunt's eyes. This strong woman, who was a department head in a multinational company, was frowning. Don't tell me you want to wear your school uniform to the gathering? Ah, no, I'm going to wash my face. How could Luonan not know that he had passed the test? He ran into the house in a hurry. During this time, he took the time to glance at the study. The large black leather box on the desk was very eye-catching, but there were no signs of it being moved, which made him heave a sigh of relief. Luonan quickly changed into casual clothes and came out. Luo Shuqing was actually a little dissatisfied with his appearance. He was clearly going to attend a gathering, but he still brought an old-fashioned notebook, as if he was going to take notes of a meeting. What was going on? In the end, she didn't point it out. She just said, "Let's go." Then she left first. Clearly, she was going to send Luonan to the gathering location. Luonan was already used to his aunt's forceful style. He was a well-behaved and obedient child. The 20-minute drive to the gathering place was destined to be full of struggles. Luonan's lackluster high school life had lasted less than a month. He had practically been asked about everything. The emphasis was placed on his relationships with his classmate. This caused Luonan, whose domain was practically blank, to be in quite a sorry state. They made it to the Limestone Water Village pub with great difficulty. Luo Shuqing was like the most dutiful of chauffeurs. She directly drove the flying car to the lobby and indicated that Luonan could get off. At the same time, her sharp eyes swept the lobby of the hotel. Luonan knew what his aunt was thinking, but he didn't have a single method to deal with it. He could only pray a few times in his heart, open the door, get off the car, and enter the lobby. Perhaps his luck had taken a turn for the better, but Luonan really did discover the sign in area of the interactive meeting in a corner of the hall according to the hint of the invitation email. Even though there was no one on duty there, the electronic sign-in screen was still there. Luonan was able to find his name without a hitch. When he finished signing, his aunt's call came. "Don't stay out too late. Call me when the party is over." Luonan let out a sigh of relief when Luo Shuqing's flying car drove away outside the hotel. He glanced at the number of people who had signed in. There were actually more than 1,000 people. In Acumen College, due to the existence of the upper limit of society members, no society would have this kind of scale. Only an inter-society sorority could pull out such a grand display. Since there were so many people, one more or one less wouldn't make a difference. He didn't have to run over halfway and attract unwanted attention. However, Zhang Yingying was really unreliable. From the tone of the phone, it sounded like she had been waiting in the hotel for a long time. But where was she now? Luonan was about to contact her again, but before he could even dial out the number, he heard laughter coming from behind him. "Nanster, I thought you weren't coming." As he spoke, the sturdy Shui strode over. Beside him was his girlfriend, Chen Xiaolin. Both of them were tall and had long legs. In just a few steps, they had already reached the front. Luonan hastily ended the call. He felt awkward and baffled. Weren't these two people too well informed? He had only signed his name. If it was only Shuele, it would be easy to handle. But facing Chen Xiaolin, Luonan still needed to be courteous. Apologies, Senior Sister Chen. I was busy so I came late. Chen Xiaolin pursed her lips into a smile. Leicester and I didn't think you would come. I was shocked to see the message on the sign-in screen. This. Luonan didn't know how to respond for a time. Chen Xiaolin seemed to have drunk a bit of alcohol. Her cheeks were slightly red and she spoke quite straightforwardly. But it's good that Junior could come. You're giving me face. After all, your sign-in counts as my performance. Having spoken to this point, Luonan naturally couldn't say that he didn't want to come. He actually wanted to leave. He could only follow the two of them to the banquet hall. It was just as Chen Xiaolin said. The cold dinner this time was very formal. There was a big shot from the student council who pulled in sponsors. They reserved the number 1 banquet hall of the hotel. The scene was extremely grand. Number 1 banquet hall was on the 27th floor. There were no unused elevators in the hall, so the three of them chatted as they waited. Chen Xiaolin talked about the matter of the society in a few words. This was also the reason why she invited Luonan to participate in the banquet. I've already found people related to the matter of the society. I'll bring you and Leicester to meet them later. Do your best to pick one that is more to your liking. Leicester, don't say that the society is boring. There are no credits. Luonan had no choice but to open his mouth. Senior Sister, the matter regarding the society actually. Chen Xiaolin frowned. You did it ahead of time? Luonan nodded in agreement. Li Mingda did it? Chen Xiaolin's face flushed red again. This time it wasn't just because she was drunk, but because she was angry. Junior, I've already mentioned it to you. The matter of the society is too complicated. It's not what you think it is. Do you know where Li Mingda is right now? He's in this hotel. He's being entertained in a private room. Even if you have to go through him, do you think it's more effective in his office or here? She's drunk. Shuele first reminded Luonan in a low voice. Then he turned to face Chen Xiaolin and guaranteed. Nanster definitely didn't go through the procedures with Elder Illustrious Virtue. I can testify to this. Elder Illustrious Virtue was quite angry at the time. Luonan could see Chen Xiaolin's state. He wasn't angry, but he found it strange that Shuele didn't explain the matter clearly to Chen Xiaolin. I asked Shuele in a whisper, and he shrugged. Isn't there that Senior Xie? He has a lot of connections there, and I'm not good with words. Luonan immediately understood that this sturdy young man of the same age, with rough lines, actually had quite a plan in mind. He was absolutely not a boorish fellow who couldn't even keep his mouth shut. What are you guys talking about? Chen Xiaolin frowned and stared at them. At this time, she was tipsy and looked charmingly naive. Luonan and Shuele raised their heads together. They were just about to explain when the elevator door opened and a dozen or so people walked out. It looked like the atmosphere was pretty good. Their laughter was loud and clear. Shuele wasn't interested in these things. He blocked the elevator door and let Chen Xiaolin and Luonan get in. Unexpectedly, Chen Xiaolin pulled him back. Wait. Huh! You see that person? He just came out of the elevator. The youngest one. I just told you about him. He's the vice president of the student council, Chen Weikan. He's the president of the Mutual Assistance Society. He's my immediate superior. Luonan and Shuele both looked over. The group of people had already walked out of the hall and were chatting outside. They couldn't see too clearly due to the contrast in the lighting. But from what they remembered, there weren't many young people inside. Chen Xiaolin took a few deep breaths in an attempt to lower her tipsy state a bit. Then she reminded them. Senior Chen is an authoritative figure in the student council. His family seems to have military connections. He's quite a nice person normally because we're from the same family. Our relationship is quite good. I didn't ask him for help with this matter, but he mentioned it. It will certainly be a lot easier to handle." She was going to strike up a conversation. Shuelei and Luonan's gazes locked. They could both see the lack of interest in each other. However, Shuelei soon grinned and was secretly kicked by Chen Xiaolin's pointed high heel. Chapter 61. Genius 1 Second. Remember, if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Look at the people that he went out with. Just the ones that I know include the heads of the parent-teacher conference, the board of directors, and the society office. These are all people that he invited to raise the standards of the cold dinner party. Even Mingda Laoxian is not qualified to be among them. Love go small. Say Netku if you talk to him. Just a few words will save you a lot of trouble. Chen Xiaolin was exasperated that Shuelei didn't live up to her expectations. Shuelei also frowned. He really couldn't do such a thing. Without waiting for a winner to be decided between the two, Chen Weikan and the others returned to the hall after sending off the guests who raised the standards. Seeing that they were approaching, Chen Xiaolin secretly pushed Shuelei, reminding him to open the elevator door. Then, she walked up to them and smiled sweetly. President Chen, on the other side, Chen Xiaolin greeted the higher-ups of the Mutual Assistance Association one by one. Shuelei hesitated for a moment, but his feet didn't move. This caused him to fall behind a beat. In front of him, Chen Xiaolin turned around and her face stiffened. Luonan saw that the situation was far from good, so he gave Shuelei a push. He himself stood at the entrance of the elevator, setting up a temporary waiting mode. By the time he raised his head, Shuelei had finally greeted the other side, but there was no more. It was mainly Chen Xiaolin who was holding the fort. The group moved towards the elevator. Chen Weikan, who was in the lead, looked really outstanding. He was tall and not particularly handsome, but his smile was gentle and a little distant. He also greeted Chen Xiaolin and Shuelei without lacking in etiquette, but his footsteps did not stop as he headed straight for the elevator. Clearly, he was the kind of person who would make others match his pace. He was a rather domineering character. In comparison, Luonan felt that he, who was standing at the entrance of the elevator, was quite like a doorman. Just as they reached the middle of the lobby, another group of people entered the hotel. The one in the lead was a woman in professional attire. She was carrying a rather retro folder and walking in a hurry. At first glance, she looked like a white-collar worker. Behind her were 4 rather capable and strong men, who were also in a hurry. This group of people was much faster than Chen Weisan's group, especially the white-collared woman in front of him. Her figure was definitely more than 1.7 meters, and she wore a pair of high-heeled shoes that were more than 5 centimeters high. Although there was nothing special about her traditional suit and trousers, it matched her tall and slender figure. Especially her long legs, under the slim trousers, the lines were beautiful, it was simply soul-stirring. Chen Xiaolin was already a tall and thin beauty, but she was still half a head shorter than the white-collared woman. This was most obvious when the two of them passed each other. Although the white-collared woman had an amazing model body, her steps were not cat-like. The distance between her steps was large, and she moved forward in a straight line. Even the 4 strong men behind her had a hard time following. When he got closer, he could see that the appearance of this white-collared lady matched her figure perfectly. Her silhouette was clear and solid, like a sculpture, but there was a coldness that kept people away. In comparison, beauty was secondary. At this moment, she was frowning as if she was thinking about something. She walked into the elevator and ignored everyone else. A few strong men followed behind him, and in the blink of an eye, they filled up half of the elevator. Well, Luonan had really become a doorman now. Chen Weikan was a bit stupefied when the white-collared woman walked by like the wind. Only when he saw the face of the white-collared woman through the lights of the elevator did he wake up from a dream. He called out in a probing manner, "Sis! Sister Fong? The white-collared woman slightly raised her head. Her gaze swept over Qin Huaizan's face, and her frown deepened. Clearly, she did not recognize who he was. Qin Huaizan was certain of his own guess. He hurried 2 steps forward and laughed. Hello, Sister Fong. I'm Qin Huaizan. My father is the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Xia City Closed Defense Army, Chen Hanxing. He strode into the elevator, and his subordinates behind him, Chen Xiaolin, Xue Lei, and the others naturally followed him in. It was a grandiose and imposing scene. The white-collared woman's gaze swept across everyone's faces at this time. It was impossible to tell whether she was happy or angry, but Chen Huaizan thought of a certain rumor. His heart suddenly jumped, and he turned his hand to block the elevator door, blocking everyone behind him. His forearm touched something at this time, but he was disinclined to pay attention to it. He turned his body to the side and didn't explain. He just said in a low voice, "You guys go next." He pressed the button to close the elevator door as he spoke, blocking the others outside. F***ck me. Luonan could clearly hear Xue Lei's cursing. Then he saw Xue Lei come over with a dark expression. He wanted to press the elevator button, but there were 2 people in between. It took a bit of time, and by the time he arrived, the elevator had already gone up. He was a step too late no matter what. He looked at Chen Xiaolin again, and she was covering her chest with her hand. Chen Huaizan had just extended his hand to block people, but he had bumped into her chest. This was a very disrespectful behavior. Of course, the elevator clearly could fit, but it was forcefully cut in 2. This kind of behavior was even more arrogant. Xue Lei was a simple and honest person, but this didn't mean that he didn't have a temper. He didn't grab Qin Huaizan, and his eyes glared at the higher-ups of the Mutual Assistance Society. His expression was quite unfriendly. If his tongue was handy, he would have started cursing right now. Those who were able to mix their way to the higher-ups of the Mutual Assistance Society, this sort of cross-society friendship society, were all shrewd people. They had a deeper understanding of Qin Huaizan. Even though they felt uncomfortable in their hearts, they still had to protect the president's face, and at the same time, their own face. Someone immediately laughed. Maybe it's some big sponsor. Speaking of which, President Chen is really working hard. Is he going to use a pretty boy trick? Chen Xiaolin came back to her senses from the side. She pulled Xue Lei and whispered, "He didn't do it on purpose. Just look at that woman. You can tell that she's not easy to mess with." Perhaps these words were all reasons, but from Xue Lei's perspective, they were too fucking roundabout. There wasn't a bit of sincerity in the roundabout. They were all bullshit. He looked around at the group of people at the elevator entrance, including Chen Xiaolin. His breathing grew heavier, and it was clear that the rage in his heart was rising. Luonan was just about to step forward when he saw the situation, but then he felt his arms sink. Then a laughing voice entered his ear. "What a rude fellow! You actually didn't wait at the door. Luckily my eyes are sharp. I nearly missed you." Zhang Yingying had arrived. Luonan turned his head and saw that this young female lawyer had already changed into a completely different attire than when she was on the warship. A denim jacket paired with a short skirt revealed her snow-white long legs. She wore leggings and open-toed Roman shoes. It was almost summer attire, and she radiated with vitality. Zhang Yingying's sudden insertion actually eased the tense atmosphere a bit. Chen Xiaolin could feel her boyfriend's rage as well as his clearly damaged self-esteem. But she didn't know how to console him for a time. She could dispel Xue Lei's rage without provoking the group of people in the Mutual Assistance Society. She could only try to divert his attention. She first pulled on Xue Lei's stiff arm. Her posture was exactly the same as Luonan and Zhang Yingying's. She forced a smile and greeted him. "Nanster, is this your girlfriend?" Luonan was just about to shake his head when Zhang Yingying giggled to the side as she responded. "Hello everyone. I'm one of Luonan's pursuers. Just call me Yingying." Chapter 62. Genius in 1 second. Remember love go? SpeakNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Chen Xiaolin was confused by Zhang Yingying's completely unconventional words. Her current state of being laden with worries really wasn't suitable to deal with Zhang Yingying, who was quick-witted and ever-changing. Fortunately, the elevator on the other side arrived at this time. The higher-ups of the Mutual Assistance Association went over first. Chen Xiaolin tugged at Shuelei, but she couldn't move him at all. The two were a bit stupefied. Luonan held Zhang Yingying's hand and lightly bumped into Shuelei when they passed each other. Only then did the stiff atmosphere break. The group of people entered the elevator, but the atmosphere inside the elevator could be imagined. The only one who wasn't affected was Zhang Yingying. She pulled Luonan to the innermost part of the spacious elevator and intimately leaned against him. Her tall stature blocked everyone's line of sight. Come. Lower your head. How could Luonan allow himself to be pinched by her? Zhang Yingying's hand moved quickly right when he was frowning. She reached out and pinched his earlobe, stuffing something into his ear. Soon, fine noises rang out. What's this? A built-in earphone? Examiner. The exam question. Okay. Actually, this toy is called the hexaear. The name isn't important, and the function isn't important. The important thing is that it's your entrance exam question. It can be very easy or it can be very difficult. Zhang Yingying lowered her hand and raised it again. This made Luonan understand that the answer to this question would determine his position in the professional society. Oh, you guys are going to the 27th floor. There's a gathering? You're not paying attention, kid. Then the exam will end at the moment we arrive at the station. Do your best. What the hell are you doing for no reason? Luonan found it hard to remain calm. He looked at the floor display and saw that they had already reached the 15th floor. Moreover, it was freaking smooth. They didn't stop at all midway. They would arrive at the station in at most 10 seconds. How could Luonan have the time to think deeply? A trembling sound rang out on the mental plane. The heavily chained crow that was most worthy of his trust passed through his skull and swept past the foreign object in his ear. Without a doubt, the heavily chained crow was Luonan's highest achievement in his format. It was also the embodiment of his ultimate strength. As for the wraith sign that was transformed from a darksider life form like the burning wraith, ability users should be more sensitive to it. Luonan instinctively avoided contact between the two. He didn't use the foremost position of the chain. At the same time, the external neuron maintained a state of readiness, ready to be connected at any time. After all, the first impression that this hexaear gave him was that of a built-in earphone, like a special electronic product. If the results of the exam weren't ideal, he would have to take it even if he had to cheat. Luonan had to fight for his position in the professional society, no matter what. This was because it represented his future. The flowing thoughts and judgments actually only took an instant. The heavily chained crow cut through the hexaear and used its resolution-limited senses to roughly analyze the internal structure of this little thing. Sure enough, this was a precision electronic product. The highly integrated components made Luonan, this electronic noob, completely stupefied. However, there was a strange reaction that came back the moment the chain cut through. Luonan's mind naturally concentrated over. The fine noises by his ears were all blocked out. Only the reaction formed a series of electrical signals that stimulated the relevant regions of the nervous system. It transmitted a set of effective information in a form that could be understood by people. Oh, this form is quite familiar? Before Luonan could react, a gentle artificial voice rang by his ear. Number 5357. Welcome to the Xia City Wilderness Explorers Branch. At the same time, a translucent area opened up on Luonan's retina. A concise visual interface appeared. It was a traditional forum interface. It displayed that the registration had already been approved. He needed to fill in the relevant information. Luonan was no stranger to this sort of virtual interface. Many companies, light film, products all had this sort of function. 2 hours ago, he had used the external neuron to have a similar experience. This was also done through telepathy. There was an instant when Luonan nearly believed that the external neuron was disobedient again. But soon he confirmed that the external neuron still maintained its original state. The hexaear was just using an extremely similar method to convert the electrical signals into the brain. Yes, it was extremely similar. Luonan reached out his hand to press against the icy cold metal wall. The rate of his heartbeat rapidly increased. This was, without a doubt, a brand new clue. A clue related to the external neuron. A clue related to that coward. He should have thought of this earlier. With his grandfather's research on the coward, he should have intersected with ability users to a certain extent. Oh my God! His decision to join the professional society was correct. Ding! An electronic notification sound rang out. The elevator had reached the 27th floor. Everyone else walked out, but Zhang Yingying stared at him with a face full of suspicion. Don't tell me you don't feel anything at all. If you're this disappointing, I'll just kick you down the stairs. Luonan was unwilling to let Zhang Yingying see his chaotic mood. He concealed it by lowering his head and walked straight out. Zhang Yingying followed him out of the elevator and said in shock, "It can't be. This doesn't make sense. My judgment shouldn't be wrong." This woman's buzzing was annoying. Luonan's already fuzzy train of thought was completely messed up. There were already welcome to the society and so on. Of course he wouldn't believe that he had failed the evaluation. He gave a cursory glance at the information-filling interface. The vast majority of the fields had drop-down options, probably to take into consideration the fuzzy nature of telepathy input. All he had to do was choose from among them. But aside from the basic age and gender, he had never seen most of the other field. For example, the ability source flow column. There were 2 drop-down options. One was the talent flow, and the other was the system flow. What the hell? Luonan spoke in a bad mood. Am I the talent flow or the system flow? Of course it's the talent flow. Luonan's mind stirred and he confirmed the options. But he still felt that he didn't understand. What's the difference between the talent flow and the system flow? The talent flow is when one is born with a certain special ability. The system flow is when one relies on an existing cultivation system to undergo arduous tempering. Zhang Yingying's voice was a bit floaty, but Luonan had already decisively overturned her judgment before she could finish speaking. I'm the system flow. What a joke. If he chose the talent flow, then wouldn't his grandfather's decades of research and his 5 years of hard work be completely negated? His mind stirred again, and he had already changed the options on the data. But before he could ask his next question, his neck suddenly tightened. Zhang Yingying had actually tightly strangled him from behind. At the same time, the young woman's energetic body pressed tightly against him, causing him to sway violently. You saw the interface, right? You're filling out the form, right? You still haven't awakened, right? A precision-oriented mental strengthening. This is going to defy the natural order. Luonan nearly fainted from Zhang Yingying's stranglehold. His brain was already a mush. Chapter 63. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? SpeakNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Zhang Yingying disregarded the situation and caused a ruckus. Of course, it was very eye-catching. Shui Lei and the others, who were about to enter the banquet venue, turned their heads one after another. They couldn't hear what Zhang Yingying was saying, but they were all dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Luonan was strangled by Zhang Yingying, unable to make any movements. Zhang Yingying smiled and waved her hand to the front, strangling Luonan to a corner. Shui Lei and the others could only assume that the young couple had some private things to say. They glanced at each other, shook their heads, and entered the venue. After this interruption, the stiff atmosphere between Chen Xiaolin and Shui Lei continued to ease. The two found an opening and went to the other side to talk. Let go. Luo Nan was strangled by the neck and forcibly kidnapped by a woman, and he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Luo Nan's self-esteem suffered a serious injury. He was truly a bit annoyed. It was true that Zhang Yingying was a familiar person, but from his perspective, he and Zhang Yingying clearly weren't that familiar. Perhaps it was because she felt his mood, or perhaps it was because her own excitement had passed, but Zhang Yingying took the initiative to loosen her arm. She recovered her cheerful appearance and pressed down on Luo Nan's chest before he flipped out. I'm worried that you haven't figured out the situation yet. Are you sure you came to participate in this cold dinner party? Luo Nan was speechless for a time, but the anger in his heart only increased. He took a deep breath. Then why did you follow me to the 27th floor? Because I had to make a choice. Zhang Yingying had a self-confident appearance. If you had no reaction at all to the hexaear, then I would have kicked you down the stairs to avoid losing face. Luo Nan sneered. Now that I have a reaction, you're going to strangle me? Hee, it was just an accident caused by a moment of excitement. Men can't be small. I'm happy for you. After all, it's really rare for an ability user candidate like you, who hasn't awakened yet, to be able to enter the psychic wave network the moment you touch the hexaear. Psychic wave network? It was unavoidable for Luo Nan's attention to be diverted. Frankly speaking, Zhang Yingying's previous appearance of shouting and wrangling gave him a bit of an idea. Zhang Yingying asked him back, "What do you think the hexaear is?" A special electronic device. Bingo! Hexaear is a psychic tool, made by President Ouyang of the branch. Don't complain, Mr. President has always been weak at naming things. Zhang Yingying giggled as she sold out another person. I won't explain the concept to you. I'll let the President talk to you personally later. You only need to understand that the hexaear is a special communication tool. It has a total of 6 communication levels. The simplest one is the radio, which is a one-way transmission of psychic waves. As long as you are an ability user or have the talent of an ability user and can receive this special psychic wave, you will be considered qualified. Luo Nan thought of that gentle artificial voice, the one that says welcome to the club? By the way, you should have a serial number, right? What is it again? 5357. Okay, wait for me to add you as a friend. Zhang Yingying suddenly paused. She blinked and changed her mind. Why don't you add me to familiarize yourself with the operation? My number is 6166. Let me tell you by the way. The next 2 communication levels are the television and the computer. The television is a one-way transmission of signals. It tests the ability user's mental senses and materialization abilities. We call it synesthesia. You are a precision type of mental enhancement. You have an advantage in this aspect. And when you reach the computer level, you can realize human-computer interaction. Then you can use the special frequency set up by the society to achieve mutual communication between network users. In order to reach this level, you need to have a bit of mental interference with reality. This is normally the privilege of the awakened. But since you are a psychic, perhaps you have a talent bonus. I'm not a talent type. Luo Nan emphasized once more. He cared a great deal about this. He was certain that if he didn't have a breakthrough in the format and didn't form the heavily chained crow, then he absolutely wouldn't be a psychic. Perhaps he wasn't a psychic at all. Zhang Yingying spread her hands. Okay, up to you. But if you don't add me as a friend, then I'm going to doubt whether or not you really have the ability. Luo Nan's face was cold as he tried to add her as a friend according to Zhang Yingying's words. But there was still a problem before his eyes. Information. Who's going to fill out stuff like information? What if some guy who doesn't like you sees it? Wouldn't that be sending your neck to the blade of someone else? Zhang Yingying's face was full of disdain as she encouraged Luo Nan. Just skip it. Come, use telepathy to control it. Try adding me as a friend? Relax, the Hexaear's fuzzy calculation ability is quite strong. As long as you have the ability, just think about it. Wow. Luonan saw the translucent interface before his eyes change amidst Zhang Yingying's gasp of surprise. It displayed, "You have already become a friend with 6,166. Then a furry squirrel jumped out and bowed towards him. On the other side, Zhang Yingying burst into laughter. "Oh my god! You're using your school photo. So stupid. Even if you use a squirrel to act cute, there's still the word stupid in front of it," Luonan retorted sarcastically. But he also discovered that this was no different from the communication software on the market. He experimentally changed the effect of his display, and soon a relevant modification interface popped up. Luonan thought for a bit and sent his visualization diagram up. The tetrahedron and its inscribed sphere spun in the dark void. It gave off a rather mysterious and serene feeling. Luonan had never considered this diagram to be some sort of secret that couldn't be announced. On the contrary, he wanted to publicize this diagram to as many people as possible, as well as the various theories related to it belonging to his grandfather. It was just that Luonan's understanding of the marvels within was far too lacking. He simply didn't have the qualifications to preach it. But as long as he had the chance, he would be happy to let more people have a deeper understanding of the diagram. As Luonan's good friend, Zhang Yingying naturally saw this change in the first instance. She mumbled "old pedant," but didn't say anything. Luonan was still pondering over the deeper usage of the Hexaear. After all, Zhang Yingying had said that it had a total of 6 application levels. She had only talked about 3 before. What were the last 3? But a notification sound rang out before he could ask in detail. A friend request popped up on his Retina interface. He had just entered the network. Where did this friend request come from? He swept a glance at the number and saw that it was displayed as 5156. Of course, he couldn't see anything from this. He could only ask Zhang Yingying, "Who's 5156? 5156. Zhang Yingying blinked her eyes. It seemed that she confirmed it with her own Hexaear. Finally, she made an expression of sudden realization. "It's the secretary assigned to you. The society has always treated its members very well. It would be strange if I believed you." Luonan cast a glance at Zhang Yingying. In the end, he still added 5156 as a friend. Soon, a new request was sent over, but it was the wartime encrypted communication that made him speechless. He couldn't help but glance at Zhang Yingying. He suspected that this woman was setting up an ambush, but in the end, he still accepted the call. He had just accepted the request when a cold and clear female voice entered his ear. It was not the slightest bit sloppy. "Mr. Luo, I'm the temporary secretary arranged by the society, Fong Yuan. Which floor are you on? I'll come pick you up." "You?" Luonan hadn't come back to his senses yet when this secretary Fong spoke. "Please share your geographical location at the same time. This will facilitate wartime communications." Over. Had he returned to the era of the Third World War? Chapter 64. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? SpeakNet provides you with wonderful novels to read. I kneel. Apologies to all the readers at the beginning of the month. I just discovered that the 2 characters, Fong Yuan and He Wei, had a conflict with the settings of the versions. I didn't check them out when I posted the draft. When I wrote later, I followed the impression of a certain version, resulting in many mistakes. I've already revised the contents of Chapter 19, Part 1, and the title and contents of Chapter 35. This character has been renamed to He Yuan. She is the Captain He who appeared in the first volume. Please forgive me, readers. Readers who use the Crosscut app, if you wish to obtain a better reading experience, please erase all data from the app and download again. Lose weight and kowtow. No, this atmosphere isn't right. Luonan always had a clear understanding of his own position. Even if he jumped out of the circle of normal society and entered the special domain of the Wilderness Explorers Society, he was still a hard-working employee. He still hadn't familiarized himself with the working environment up until now. Naturally, he hadn't found a suitable position. But now you're telling me that he even has a secretary? Luonan stared at Zhang Yingying. Without a doubt, this innocent-looking woman certainly knew the cause and effect. Zhang Yingying's face was as white as a lotus flower. Did your secretary say how to arrange things? Luonan curled his lips. How did you guys arrange things before? You just invited me to walk in the elevator? Now that the evaluation is over, can I go home? Don't. The entrance evaluation is over, but there are other advanced evaluations. The society has already booked a room on the 81st floor. We'll entertain you well. You just need to bury your head in there and draw. Draw. Luonan's train of thought gradually straightened out. He stared coldly at her. You guys want to evaluate my psychic abilities? This is different from what you said. Zhang Yingying had an innocent expression. Yeah, I told you before. It's best not to expose the fact that you have psychic abilities. You should first familiarize yourself with the situation in the society. It won't be too late to take it out when your abilities truly awaken. Otherwise, many people will come to bother you. You won't be able to refuse them, and you might offend someone. Word for word, right? Luonan continued to stare at her. Zhang Yingying spread her hands. The problem is that my words aren't worth a fart. Now that the boss had spoken, the situation had changed. What else could I do? I was going to explain it to you when we get there, but since you can already see the interface and control it with your mind, please switch to the homepage announcement area. The translucent interface on Luonan's retina underwent a change following Zhang Yingying's guidance. As far as the eye could see, the rust-colored soil and the wave-like cracks continued to extend endlessly into the depths. You should have already seen the main interface. It's the wilderness, right? There's a notice board by the side of the road. It's there. What kind of third-rate game interface is this? Luonan cursed silently as he read the information. In less than half a second, words like Darksider species, human-faced arachnid, virus, and so on swarmed in. They interweaved to form a blurry and gloomy screen of darkness before his eyes. Fine cold sweat seeped out from Luonan's spine with a whoosh. See, do I still need to say more? Right now, it was a war against the Darksider race and its infected. The government, the military, the society, and Quantum Corporation are sparing no expense to launch a search and annihilation operation in the entire city. This epidemic must be completely contained before it spreads on a large scale. Zhang Yingying's finger tapped on Luonan's chest, one tap after another. Her face was devoid of a rare smile. My attitude is very serious. The society's attitude is also very serious. Every ability user, no matter if they're veterans or rookies, must contribute their strength when it comes to matters related to our safety. Moreover, Mr. Luo, who has just joined the society, you are a psychic. For the current society, you are what we need the most precious resource. Luonan muttered, the most precious resource? Of course. Do you know how many psychics the society has right now? Even a branch like Xia City, which has over 1,000 people, only has 4. One of them is currently exploring the wilderness and won't be able to rush back in a short amount of time. As for the remaining 3, Old Master Yu is nearly 100 years old. It would be inhumane to have him run around day and night. He can only sit in the central command. Then East City and West City are divided. Old Gao and Old Bai are working hard right now. And then you discovered a new coolie. Luonan sneered in order to conceal the nervousness in his heart. In a certain sense, he could be considered a virus-infected person. It was just that the Darksider seed that had invaded his body had been subdued by the dark chains formed by the format's power. But the problem was that this kind of subduing didn't eliminate the root. The burning wraith had transformed into the wraith sign, but it still retained its instincts. It was still able to devour its own kind, to strengthen itself. Only the heavens knew whether or not his current state could be considered an infected person in the eyes of a group of ability users. Whether or not he was still a target to be strangled. But Luo Nan also had a sort of indescribable excitement amidst his nervousness. The human-faced arachnid. This sort of peculiar existence expanded the depth and breadth of his understanding of the burning wraith in an instant. It allowed him to overlook the ins and outs of this matter from a higher level. It allowed him to overlook the cause and effect of this matter. Moreover, he had a completely new concept of what he could do in the future. This was a large net laid down by the human-faced arachnid. He was originally a node in this net, but now it had already mutated. From the Society's judgment, any other node that carried out the net operation would probably restore the human-faced arachnid to its peak. The human-faced arachnid's treacherous and bewitching nature would be displayed to the fullest. But looking at how his format was suppressing the wraith sign, wouldn't he be able to completely grasp the terrifying power of the human-faced arachnid in the end if he were to start from this point? Wasn't this the extraordinary power he had always been pursuing? It was also a power grasped by the power of his format. Perhaps this was where the mysteries of his grandfather's research lay? Hey, what are you thinking about? You're not scared stupid, are you? Luo Nan came back to his senses in a daze. He didn't immediately respond. Zhang Yingying patted his shoulder. Don't be scared. It's normal to be scared. But it's already very gratifying that you didn't cry for your mother. Relax. We just want to borrow your marvelous draw ability. And we'll absolutely protect you. Look, you have me now. Then the Society arranged a full-time secretary for you. It's He Wayne, right? She's a monster who entered the Society with a C+ score. A genius. Her true strength can only be higher and not lower. Luo Nan concealed a smile. Don't they say that only psychics are useful when facing the Darksider species? What are you thinking about? Any qualified awakened has a method to lock onto the Darksider species in a true battle. It's just that each method is different. Many people can even see it with their naked eyes. Zhang Yingying solemnly corrected Luo Nan's preposterous and laughable train of thought. The true problem is that when the Darksider species is in a hidden state, only psychics can discover the clues. The Society is relying on your ability in this aspect. Who would send you to the front lines? Oh really? Luo Nan became even more nervous. It seemed that his situation was more similar to that of an awakened. It was also a intuition. At most, he could rely on the wraith sign to sense it at close range. As for psychics, when he fooled Zhang Yingying, all he did was draw what he saw. In addition, Li Xueqing had a bit of a psychic's intent. But the premise was that the burning wraith on Li Xueqing's body had already taken form. They could sense each other. This kind of situation was seriously different from the long-range senses of a psychic. What to do? Luo Nan wanted to pick up his notebook right now. He wanted to make some gestures to avoid making a fool of himself on stage. In fact, he really did take out his notebook. He opened the flexible e-ink screen and drawing software. Chapter 65. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Zhang Yingying burst out laughing when she saw this. Sharpening a spear at the last minute? Even if it's not fast, it's still good. Do you really think this is an exam? Luo Nan didn't even raise his head. Someone said that I'm a psychic, but I've never admitted it. Now that it seems like it's not bad, I'll draw a picture to get a feel for it. If it really is. You mentioned what if to me. Zhang Yingying saw that Luo Nan wasn't sharpening his spear at the last minute. Instead, he was running away at the last minute. Her almond eyes immediately widened and she grabbed him by the collar. You're able to draw my white rainbow and that bizarre prison building sketch. How could you not be a psychic? Sure, I'm a shaman. Luo Nan continued to place his gaze on the drawing software. He wanted to draw something, but his mind was in chaos. He had no idea what to draw at all. At this time, Zhang Yingying was still talking noisily in his ear, so he decided to just throw in the towel. You were the one who introduced the concept of shamans to me. I'll also take the association's offer. Anyways, in the end, it'll be you, Sister Yingying, paying the bill, right? Luo Nan had never used such an intimate form of address before. It made Zhang Yingying fall back in disgust. Kids with reverse psychology were not easy to deal with. Zhang Yingying's eyeballs swiveled. Her hand that was gripping Luo Nan's collar loosened a bit. It's just hiring a C++ secretary and bodyguard. I can afford it for one night at most. On the other hand, if you want to enjoy this kind of treatment for a long time, then you'll have to put in a bit of effort. Alright, you seem to have said that you needed inspiration or something. Do you want to find a bit of excitement? Acumen College's large living area has a very high level of service. In this mutually shameless competition, Luo Nan was defeated by Zhang Yingying's abundant experience in the end. He pursed his lips and said nothing. Distractedly, he drew meaningless lines on his graphics software. At the end of the day, he still cared a lot about the professional association's courtesy. This was a high starting point that he had never imagined before, and it was also a great opportunity that fell from the sky. He didn't want to let this opportunity slip through his fingers, so he had to do something. Luo Nan tried to recall this morning's practice that was most similar to a psychic's methods. But that dreamlike feeling was really too mysterious, and with his current restless state, it was really difficult for him to completely recreate it. Zhang Yingying tilted her head and looked at the messy lines on the flexible screen. The more she looked, the more suspicious she became. Hey, if you want to make fun of yourself, don't drag me into it. Luo Nan was disinclined to pay attention to her. Someone walked past them at this time, and the person felt a bit familiar. Raising his head, he saw that it was Shui Lei and Chen Xiaolin. Both of them had ugly expressions on their faces. Clearly, the previous conversation had not been resolved. The atmosphere between the two of them was extremely tense. At this time, they were walking in the direction of the elevator, not knowing what they were going to do. Under such circumstances, it was obviously not appropriate to greet them. Luo Nan could only pretend that he didn't see anything. He lowered his head and smeared 2 more times, but he inexplicably drew out the abstract lines of the wraith sign. Moreover, it was done in one go. It had never been so efficient before. Luo Nan only came back to his senses when the symbol took form. His heart palpitated slightly. He was worried that Zhang Yingying would see some clues, so he raised his head to glance at her. He saw that this woman had long since been dazzled by his chaotic lines. She was a bit foolish for once. You feel something? Luo Nan was just about to respond with a sentence when he suddenly went mute. Suddenly drawing the wraith sign had some ominous implications. In the next moment, he completely followed his instincts and turned his head. Shui Lei and Chen Xiaolin had already gotten into the elevator. The lights in the elevator shone down, but they were unable to illuminate the gloomy faces of the two. He felt that a dispute could erupt between the two at any time. And at this time, a bizarre thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind. It was the information he had just looked up this morning. It came from the secret star forums. It was a suspected mental illness a human tragedy triggered. The wife killed the husband, and before this, the husband and wife experienced a nightmare at the same time. Alert! 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 The bold-faced words of the secret star forums appeared in his mind. Luo Nan closed his notebook with a bang. He turned around and headed toward the elevator, shouting loudly at the same time, Shui Lei! This loud shout was absolutely impulsive. Even Luo Nan found it a bit hard to continue after the shout left his mouth. He didn't know how to explain himself. But right at this moment, a trembling sound rang out on the mental plane. The heavily chained crow hummed. And most importantly, The wraith sign at the very front of the chain lit up with a dark red glow. Luo Nan's mind throbbed, but what immediately floated up in his mind was that he didn't know what to do. This was because the wraith sign's senses clearly came from two completely opposite directions. One was directly in front, and the other was directly behind. Luo Nan could clearly see what was happening directly in front of him. Right when Shuelei was staring at him in a daze, a ghost-like burning wraith appeared. Half of the wraith's body had sunk into Shuelei's shoulder. It was unknown whether it was being pulled out or whether it was continuing to seep in. Reality and illusion interweave. The strange scene of a human body and a wraith merging together made one's scalp go numb. And directly behind him, "Careful!" Zhang Yingying's screech and the sharp whistling sound of tearing air rang out at the same time. The elevator door was already closing at this time. Luo Nan could clearly see a warped figure sticking to his body on the smooth metal door. The figure's shoulder exploded with blood. The blood sprayed out and landed on the side of Luo Nan's neck. And at the same time, Luo Nan's back violently shook. It was as if someone was pushing against him, causing him to fall forward. But the force was too great. In the end, Luo Nan's feet didn't touch the ground at all. He soared into the air and collided with the elevator door that had yet to close. The elevator door approached at high speed, and the gap between the doors slowly shrank. Luo Nan could roughly understand that he was probably being used as a tool to block the door. Then the elevator door opened to the two sides at this time. A figure staggered and fell to the side, smashing into a corner of the elevator. It was Chen Xiaolin. As for Shuelei, this big fellow who was being cut by half of the wraith was blocking the door. His simple and honest face even carried a bit of childishness. He was like an angry Vajra, and his thick palm chopped down at Luo Nan's face. Perhaps it was because of the haste, but Luo Nan didn't even have the time to stir up his negative emotions. Right now Luo Nan was actually quite calm. In the blink of an eye, Shuelei's palm cut past Luo Nan's ear. He grabbed Luo Nan's shoulder and pushed down lightly. Luo Nan instantly broke free from his suspended state. He involuntarily tumbled and fell into the corner of the elevator, in the same direction as Chen Xiaolin. Luo Nan's field of view spun as he tumbled, but the heavily chained crow drove the wraith sign. The entire surrounding environment of the elevator was mapped into his brain. At the same time, an angry roar rang out beside his ear. Shuelei had already collided with the shadow that had pounced into the elevator. It looked like Shuelei wanted to knock the person out of the elevator. But the opponent's momentum was far too strong. Shuelei's majestic body was actually completely unable to resist. His entire body fell backwards, smashing heavily into the back of the elevator. From Luo Nan's senses, it seemed as if the entire building was swaying. Chapter 66. Genius in 1 second. Remember love go away? SpeakNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. The swing of the elevator was quite intense. Perhaps the violent vibrations had caused some kind of circuit failure, but the elevator doors didn't even close. The entire elevator suddenly sank down, sinking no less than half a floor. Zhang Yingying, who had rushed up from behind, was nearly crushed to death in the intertwining cracks of the elevator. Fortunately, she was able to make an emergency stop, narrowly avoiding disaster. But she looked at the sealed entrance and stamped her feet in anxiety. The elevator soon came to a stop. This sort of maglev elevator floated within the magnetic passageway. The moment the elevator's swing exceeded the safety line, it would automatically activate its mechanical lock and fix its position. This also meant that the elevator would become a sealed space for a short period of time. Luo Nan and Chen Xiaolin didn't have the ability to fight. Their fates would be decided by Shuelei and his enemy, who were currently entangled together. Shuelei's face flushed red. The man wearing a black suit in front of him was a size smaller than him, but the strength the man displayed was far above his own. Shuelei's internal organs felt as if they had been flipped upside down after receiving a frontal attack. Even breathing was difficult for a few seconds. What was even more bizarre was that the other party clearly had a serious wound on his shoulder that tore through his flesh and bone. His face didn't have any distinctive features, but it was so apathetic that it made one's heart go cold. His exertion of strength wasn't affected at all. Right now, the two's arms were pressed against each other, and their legs were apart. Their entire bodies were entangled together. Shuelei was just about to use a wrestling method to seize back some of the initiative, but he saw his enemy open his mouth, revealing dense white teeth, and directly bite at Shuelei's throat. Shuelei grunted and relied on his height to smash down with his head. His forehead collided with the enemy's face, blocking this vicious beast-like bite. It was reasonable to say that Shuelei's choice was brave and correct. The position of his collision was also advantageous, but the other party was clearly bleeding from his nose and mouth, yet it was as if nothing had happened. Shuelei's head was dizzy, and in the end it affected his body's exertion of strength. His feet floated slightly, and just as he was about to cry out in his heart, his whole body was lifted off the ground by the brute force of the other party. Then, the world spun around him, and he fell heavily on the metal floor with a hollow sound. This time, he almost threw up his heart and lungs. However, years of arduous training came into play. The instant Shuelei lost his balance, he almost instinctively twisted his legs, and in the end, he still managed to trip the enemy. Taking advantage of this gap, Shuelei's majestic body contracted at an unbelievable degree, and then bounced up again. Just as the enemy was about to pounce on him, Shuelei took advantage of the momentum to deliver another headbutt. This time, it was from the bottom up, hitting the enemy's chest. After 2 consecutive tremors, Shuelei and the enemy were pushed back at the same time, hitting the metal inner wall behind them. What was worth rejoicing about was that Shuelei's grasp of direction was quite good. He pushed the enemies in the opposite direction from Luonan and Chen Xiaolin. He leaned slightly to the side and was able to protect the two who had no combat strength. He should be able to take a breather now, right? Shuelei's chest heaved up and down violently. He didn't know why, but he was in a terrible state today. His stamina consumption was especially severe. The previous round of dangerous hand-to-hand combat had almost completely emptied his stamina. Was it because he was too nervous? Shuelei couldn't figure out his own situation, and the enemy in front of him didn't immediately make a move. Instead, he used a strange and unfocused gaze to look over here. He was simply like a mental patient. "Are you guys crazy?" Chen Xiaolin, who was in the corner, was finally able to somewhat react after a series of unforeseen events. Everything that happened before her eyes had already completely exceeded the limits of her common sense. She knew that her boyfriend could fight very well, but she had never seen him fight to the death without saying a word. There was absolutely no reason at all. Luonan, whom she had just gotten to know today, had joined in as well. It looked like he was standing on their side. Or perhaps it was because of this fellow that the inexplicable murderer was drawn in. What she couldn't bear the most was the as-it-should-be expressions on their faces. What the hell was going on? Chen Xiaolin struggled to stand up. She felt a sense of absurdity and dread that separated herself from the rational dimension. It made her instinctively want to flee this area, to flee from these people. But how could she do this in the completely sealed elevator? She could only shout at the top of her lungs. "Can't you guys stop and talk nicely? We're all trapped right now." "Shut up." Short shouts came from the mouths of 2 people at the same time. Shuelei and Luonan spoke in unison, shouting to stop Chen Xiaolin's irrational actions of not understanding the situation at all. After shouting, Shuelei locked onto the enemy in front of him with full concentration. Luonan spoke a few more words. "Senior sister, please calm your emotions, okay?" As he spoke, he turned his face to face Chen Xiaolin from all sides. Chen Xiaolin was stupefied for a moment. She was locked in place by Luonan's mottled and strange gaze. It was as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out in an instant. She leaned against the corner of the elevator, her mind a field of blankness. Luo Nan used hypnosis to temporarily control Chen Xiaolin. Then he raised his head to look at the upper part of the elevator. Xue Lei's attention was on the formidable enemy before him, but Luo Nan's attention was on an even stranger level. The burning wraith that had struggled within Xue Lei's body in the previous fight had already drilled out from Xue Lei's body. It had seized a considerable amount of blood and energy. And at the same time, the burning wraith also leaped out from within the body of the fierce black-suited male. The two intertwined and fused together before Luo Nan could react, growing stronger in an instant. This sort of change really exceeded the scope of Luo Nan's reaction. Luo Nan also wanted to resolve this problem. The heavily chained crow had already been released and the wraith sign was glowing. But it didn't display the crushing superiority of the previous few times. It even displayed a bit of caution and conservatism. This was because the burning wraith that had just fused together in the elevator was the most powerful one Luo Nan had ever seen. Even the one Luo Nan had once controlled to turn the military transport ship upside down seemed to be somewhat inferior. The appearance of the burning wraith's body was even more similar to the appearance of the human-faced arachnid from the R&D district. Luo Nan saw the information from Quantum Corporation and confirmed a step further. The burning wraith's body was indeed like a hybrid between a human and a spider. To be more precise, it was a giant spider that was clinging onto the back of a human. Half of its body was fused into the human's body. The two shared the same head. It was ugly and demonic. The wraith floated in midair. Actually, it was still using a strange method to endlessly absorb the energy from Xue Lei and the black-suited male. Xue Lei's symptoms of being easily fatigued actually came from this. His opponent was actually more or less the same. Through the senses of the wraith sign, Luo Nan was able to estimate a few things on a deeper level. The current burning wraith had already devoured at least 10 or more of its own kind to display this sort of form. In other words, purely in terms of quantity, it was several times stronger than the wraith sign on Luo Nan's side. Luo Nan couldn't help but sigh at his own naivety as he thought about the hunting thoughts that had just existed. This was the rhythm of being devoured by the enemy. Chapter 67. A genius in 1 second remembers love go away? This is the web that provides you with wonderful novels to read. Luo Nan stared fixedly at the burning wraith within the elevator. The latter's attention shifted over accordingly. This was a sort of eye-to-eye contact. 6 bewitching flames lit up on the head of the burning wraith. They were 2 parallel rows, truly resembling the eyes of a spider. The color of each eye was different. They were divided into 6 colors: dusky yellow, dark red, light gray, ghostly green, deathly white, and jet black. Each dot was extremely small, but the color of each dot swayed back and forth. It was bewitching and strange, making one dizzy. Luo Nan looked over and many muddy and chaotic thoughts arose from the bottom of his heart. His entire mood swelled with irritation. He wished he could smash something to vent his emotions. Fortunately, the heavily chained crow trembled as its vibrating sound swept over, suppressing these inexplicable emotions and distracting thoughts. The demonic eyes of the burning wraith flickered and changed, clearly noticing Luo Nan's heavily chained crow. Of course, there was also the wraith sign that flickered at the very front. In Luo Nan's eyes, its first action was to assume a pouncing posture. This was no different from the reaction of its kind in the school's medical department this morning. Luo Nan also assumed a defensive posture, preparing to give it a painful head-on attack. However, this burning wraith didn't actually pounce over. On the contrary, it even retreated a bit to increase the distance between it and Luo Nan. Its blurry face slightly tilted upwards, and it let out a shriek that was hard for ordinary people to hear, but it surged on the mental plane. Luo Nan's heart jumped. He practically instantly thought of the fearful roar from yesterday on the warship. He didn't have time to think too much. The heavily chained crow hummed as it broke through the air, striking directly at the burning wraith. But the enormous wave of the mental attack came even faster. When the heavily chained crow touched the burning wraith, Chen Xiaolin behind him had already let out a shriek. Her emotions of fear burst forth, and her entire body crashed into the inner wall of the elevator. She wanted to find a way to escape, but she simply didn't have any opportunity to do so. Her entire body stiffened, and her eyes slightly bulged out from fear. A dark red bloody light soared from her body, shooting straight at the burning wraith. She instantly became dispirited and fainted as the bloody light broke out from her body. Luonan was truly unable to obstruct this sort of incorporeal method. He himself needed to rely on the suppression of the heavily chained crow in order to stabilize his mind and his surging blood and energy. And the chains that traversed through the air seemed to have been affected by the main body. They lost their previously all-conquering strength and stopped outside the burning wraith, trembling. At that moment, the effect of fear roar was far from over. In the elevator, the black-suited male, who was obviously under the control of the burning wraith, let out a short roar and once again pounced towards Shuelei. Shuelei was obviously affected by Chen Xiaolin's scream. His body trembled, causing him to lose the initiative. However, he did not show any signs of weakness. He mustered all his remaining strength, and with a low roar, he pushed forward. Both sides once again clashed head-on, and this time, Shuelei only took half a step back. He took a punch, and at the same time, he returned an elbow. For the time being, he did not seem to be at a disadvantage. But Luonan wasn't happy. This was because he could already see that the intense combat and the surging emotions were the best catalyst. It caused the blood and energy of the two to transform into a long line of bloody light, endlessly pouring into the burning wraith in the air. Such a method of drawing blood and sucking marrow was more than 10 times more tyrannical than the spore environment of the simmering over a small fire from before. The burning wraith's ability to interfere with reality had already exceeded his imagination. Luonan suspected that if he continued to suck like this incorporeal wraith, which only existed on the mental plane, would be able to completely materialize from incorporeal and appear on the material plane. And what made him most vigilant was the opponent's calm attitude. The burning wraith had actually controlled its devouring instincts. It did not directly pounce forward, but instead increased its own strength to the greatest limit to increase its chances of victory. This could already be called an intelligent judgment. Sure enough, the name given by Quantum Corporation, human-faced arachnid, was the most appropriate name for this monster that was endlessly approaching a complete body. This was a savage and cunning hunter. It used every method to weaken its prey and strengthen itself. It was really hard to imagine just what kind of power its complete body would have. Luonan knew that the situation was becoming more and more unfavorable. With the support of Shuelei and the black-suited male, the power that the human-faced arachnid was able to grasp was rising with the tide. Luonan's heavily chained crow continued to attempt to penetrate through the incorporeal body of the arachnid. The wraith sign at the front was also doing its utmost to devour all the energy it could reach. But there was always a faint layer between them. After a few penetrations and disturbances, the core of the human-faced arachnid remained majestically motionless. Moreover, it continued to strengthen endlessly. Right now, the human-faced arachnid's main focus was still on strengthening its body. Once this strengthening came to an end, Luonan really didn't know what kind of terrifying attack would come next. As for Luonan himself, it seemed that he had reached his limit. These sorts of chaotic thoughts merely flashed before they were completely dispelled. Actually, there was still one more move. Luonan no longer looked at the human-faced arachnid. Instead, he closed his eyes and forced himself to enter the fixed space. Thanks to these past 2 days of difficult tempering, Luonan's mental state had made considerable progress. The visualization diagram of the tetrahedron, the inscribed sphere, and the outer scribed sphere appeared in the void in the blink of an eye. the heavily chained crow pulled out from the central region of the human-faced arachnid. It extended outward segment by segment in an attempt to penetrate deeper into the human-faced arachnid. But no matter what, it was separated by a layer. It was far from reaching the destructive might it had when it first subdued the burning wraith. Before, Luonan believed that it was because the human-faced arachnid was excessively powerful. But now he had other thoughts. Perhaps the problem lay with him. What state was he in when the heavily chained crow displayed its greatest power? There was only one answer: the out-of-body state. The feeling of being transparent and clear, which disregarded all material objects, had disappeared ever since he returned to the out-of-body state. Luonan didn't understand the reasoning behind it, but the threat was right in front of him. He didn't have the time to ponder over it. Even if he treated a dead horse as a living one, he still had to go. The out-of-body state was an unfamiliar experience for Luonan. At first, he was struck by the siege hammer of the burning wraith. Then he was pulled by the heavily chained crow, forcing him into an out-of-body state. Now he had to take the initiative and continue his train of thought from back then. He transmitted the relevant thoughts through the heavily chained crow to the wraith sign. A marvelous vibration was transmitted back, instantly washing over his entire body. This time, Luonan's senses were even clearer. He clearly touched upon an incorporeal membrane. Originally, he didn't have the strength to break it, but under the pull of an external force, the internal and external attacks intersected. A hole instantly split open in this membrane. He immediately lost his bindings and floated up. Luonan's eyes were still closed, but his senses on the mental plane were completely opened. And at this moment, he met the peerlessly bizarre gaze of the human-faced arachnid. In the state of a soul body, the rattling sound of the heavily chained crow's trembling seemed to be even more fine and clear. It was precisely this subtle change that made Luonan instantly understand that his judgment was correct. The previous barrier wasn't because of any other reason. The most important reason just happened to come from his fleshly body. He definitely had to carefully study this problem later. In front of him, the human-faced arachnid's 6 eyes flickered. It was a bit eager to make a move. Perhaps it felt that it had accumulated enough superiority? Or perhaps Luonan in the out-of-body state looked more delicious and easier to bully. Luonan abandoned his final stray thoughts and looked straight at the human-faced arachnid without fear. Let's try again? The battle was on the verge of breaking out, but in this instant, the elevator's safety skylight collapsed with a rumble. A human figure flew down and smashed right into the head of the black-suited male, who had just crossed the middle of the elevator. Chapter 68. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. By right, the black-suited man's reaction was considered fast. Even when he was fighting with Shuele, he still managed to twist his body to dodge. The problem was that the elevator compartment was only so big. Shuele had to use a small portion of the compartment in order to protect Luonan and Chen Xiaolin, who were behind him. The space left for the black clothes was very little. In the end, he still had to use his arms to block. With a bang, the metal plate smashed onto the shoulder of the black suit. The predicted huge force had completely disappeared. The light metal plate was directly deformed. He had exerted force at the last moment and had even used the wrong amount of force. No matter how fierce the black suit was, he could not help but fall into a state of paralysis. Seeing the opportunity, Shuele threw a punch without caring about anything else. However, his vision blurred again. He seemed to see a figure behind the black-suited man. Then, there was the crisp sound of bones breaking. The black-suited man twisted his body and came crashing over. This time, Shuele had misjudged the distance. He instinctively turned his fist into a palm, wanting to push the black-suited man away. However, he had suddenly cut in between him and the black-suited man by lowering his body. It just so happened that Shuele's arm was pushed outwards, leaving him wide open. His opponent's palm went up and struck his chin, sending a tremor into his brain. Xuelei's body stiffened. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to control his body. Just as he was struggling, the side of his neck was struck by another chop. This time he could not hold on any longer. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. In the blink of an eye, both sides in the life and death combat had fallen. They had both lost consciousness, and the blood and chi channels that were channeled to the human-faced arachnid had been severed. Although it was crude, it was a good method to take drastic measures. Luonan's mind shook. He immediately knew that reinforcements had arrived. The human-faced arachnid was endlessly enraged. Its 6 monstrous eyes suddenly lit up as it peered at the newcomer. The ripples on the mental plane condensed to the point of materialization and came crashing down. It was none other than the siege hammer. Luonan cried out in his mind. He tried to use the heavily chained crow to interfere with the human-faced arachnid, but the chained crow did indeed display a state that was vastly different from when it was in the out-of-body state. The chained crow pierced deeper, seeming to be about to touch the core of the human-faced arachnid. However, it was hard for the chained crow to display its immediate effect. It was at this moment that the red light in the elevator box exploded. Luonan had the urge to squint his eyes. This was the reaction of a soul body. Because right in front of them, the newly arrived reinforcements seemed to be bursting with a layer of raging flames. The blazing flames illuminated the interior and exterior. The siege hammer, aimed directly at the soul level, extinguished more than half of the raging flames, but in the end, it still didn't completely break through. On the contrary, the flames rose again after a slight setback, even exploding with an even more violent momentum than before, completely annihilating the impact on the mental level. Then, the flames filled the entire elevator, and the momentum was unparalleled. Format of fire. Luonan's mind couldn't help but be shaken, but he soon discovered that something was wrong. His soul body was swept by the light of the flames, and the pain he felt yesterday when he left his body reappeared. It was as if he was being cut by a knife. However, the coldness that froze his soul completely transformed into a scorching heat. So it didn't differentiate between friend and foe. Luonan saw that the situation was far from good. All thoughts of fighting a great battle after leaving his body were wiped away. Though he did not directly return to his body, he took a step back and hid behind his main body. He relied on the aura of his main body to block this wave of unexpected disaster. At the same time, a light whistle rang out from the elevator. The ice-cold blade light streaked across the sky, forming a clear contrast with the raging flames within the elevator. Yet it also miraculously blended together. The raging flames controlled the cold blade, and the glaring trajectory branded itself onto Luonan's mental plane. It didn't disperse for a long time. Love go small say, Netka, this blade looked very familiar. The human-faced arachnid was already in discomfort from being burned by the format of fire, and it was even more wary when facing the blade light. It instinctively wanted to dodge. But at this time, the heavily chained crow finally displayed its use after a period of adaptation. The chains suddenly snapped straight, and the chained body that was already pointing straight at the core of the human-faced arachnid radiated a myriad of fine threads. Though it lacked a bit of irresistible momentum, no matter what the human-faced arachnid wanted to do right now, it was able to carry out some interference and suppression. It was enough for the human-faced arachnid to slow down by a bit. The blade light tore through the air and instantly tore a wound through the body of the human-faced arachnid's phantom. Everything it passed through turned into nothingness. The human-faced arachnid hissed once more, but this time it was a miserable shriek. Before the shriek had even finished, the demonic body that was about to condense into substance actually exploded with a rumble. It transformed into countless dim rays of light that penetrated through the elevator box and dispersed in all directions. There was still this move? Luonan was greatly surprised. He could feel that the human-faced arachnid hadn't received any fatal injuries. The only reason it had disintegrated was for the sake of fleeing for its life. Who would believe this sort of judgment without a certain amount of intelligence? The heavily chained crow withdrew. With the wraith sign at the front, he felt that the human-faced arachnid had instantly disintegrated into chaos. He felt that the wraith sign had torn off a piece and devoured it in an instant. Luo Nan didn't carefully experience it, but he didn't want to delay any longer. His soul body threw itself into his body, returning to his body, and he opened his eyes. From his angle, he just happened to see the swift and fierce blade light return. In the end, it seemed to shrink back into the sleeve. Only the heavens knew that with such a close-fitting cut, there was no space to hide the blade's edge. Luo Nan couldn't help but size up the figure in detail. This figure looked a bit familiar. This is... Luo Nan opened his mouth to speak, but a wave of dizziness suddenly assaulted him. His body leaned back, pressing against the inner wall of the elevator. The ice-cold metal surface was soon heated up by his body temperature. Sure enough, the out-of-body technique was a very dangerous move. The consumption was enormous. The soul body had to bear a portion of the attack, and the fleshly body had to bear the brunt of it in the end. Speaking of which, he hadn't even eaten dinner today. He was already very hungry. But right now, this feeling of being very, 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 very full. What was going on? Luo Nan slowly inhaled and exhaled in an attempt to alleviate the endlessly increasing feeling of bloating. But it was useless. The feeling of being stuffed came from the mental plane. It was like the wraith sign had taken a bite and forgot to measure how big its stomach was. It had been stuffed by the human-faced arachnid's gift. The piece torn from the body of the human-faced arachnid didn't just contain pure energy. It also contained an enormous amount of information. The heavily chained crow possessed a certain analytical ability, but it wasn't able to operate properly when faced with such an enormous amount of chaotic information. Clearly, this information exceeded the limits of Luo Nan's understanding. What to do? Oh, perhaps it's possible. Luo Nan's mind stirred, and the external neuron buried within the flexible e-ink screen reacted. It connected with the heavily chained crow in an instant. It was as if a floodgate had been opened. Luo Nan didn't care if this enormous amount of information was useful or not. He stuffed it all in. His thoughts were very simple. Both input and reverse output were input. The external neuron was able to control multiple system modules in the laboratory at the same time. It could suppress the enormous amount of information within the supercomputer. It shouldn't be a problem to deal with the excess information on the body of the human-faced arachnid. Reality proved that his judgment was correct. The external neuron really did consume as much information as it could, without any adverse reactions. The resolution of his mental senses was limited. Luo Nan didn't know how the external neuron operated in the end. He wanted to open the flexible screen and take a look. A hand reached out in front of him at this time. Chapter 69. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? This is the web that provides you with wonderful novels to read. The hand that was extended in front of him was slender and spotlessly white. The cold and hard contours of the joints revealed a different meaning. Luo Nan raised his head and a familiar face entered his eyes. It looked excessively cold and indifferent. It was hard to deal with. There was also the suit and trousers. There was a considerable contradiction with the memories of a dozen seconds ago where the blade light had crisscrossed. You are He Wayne, your temporary secretary. I'm very sorry, Mr. Luo. I came late. Right, her surname was also He. Luo Nan finally confirmed. Wasn't this the white-collared woman he met in the hotel lobby before? She was the one who made Chen Weikan of the Mutual Assistance Society call her sister He. He had even been this person's doorman. But today, this sister He had become his secretary. There seemed to be quite a large difference between the rules of the world of normal people and the world of ability users. It seemed to be more advantageous to him. He Yuan's eyes drooped slightly at this time. Her temperament was a bit different from the cold and proud face in his memories. Only now did Luonan realize that this person's gaze was far too fierce. When she intentionally or unintentionally concealed this characteristic, the impression she left behind was a thin and quiet person. Of course, she was also extremely beautiful. It really was good to have a secretary like this. A tiny sprout of vanity sprouted in his mind, but it was immediately uprooted. Luonan didn't forget Zhang Yingying's introduction of the situation. This was probably the special period of the human-faced arachnid's rampage. This was the embodiment of the value of psychic. If he really took this for granted, he would probably be sent to the Wilderness Explorers Society's joke wall. He would be forever remembered. All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. He Yuan's hand was still placed in front of him. Luonan's mind spun a bit before he reacted. He reached out and clasped her hand. When he truly touched her hand, he felt that He Yuan's hand was indeed as cold and hard as it appeared. Many of her fingertips and joints were covered in calluses. In comparison, Luonan's own palm was like that of a young master who had never experienced the baptism of wind and frost. It was a bit too soft. He Yuan exerted a bit of force and brought the half-leaning, half-falling Luonan up. She pulled her hand out, but she still supported him. It was as if she was afraid that Luonan would fall again. Actually, Luonan really wanted to tell her that he was just a bit hungry and a bit full. His body was fine. But when he thought about it again, he felt that this statement was no different from a lunatic. He changed the direction of his words and pointed at the unconscious Shuelei. "Is he okay? This is my friend. He saved me just now." Luonan was really worried that He Yuan would treat Shuelei as an enemy and dispose of him. "She's just temporarily unconscious. She'll wake up when her qi and blood rush through the bottleneck. But the other lady is a bit more troublesome. She may need to be hospitalized for observation, and a psychiatrist will be arranged. Wait a moment." As He Yuan finished speaking, she lightly pressed her ear. She should be communicating with someone through the hexaear. Luonan didn't feel that he was being left out. He took this opportunity to continue sizing up and evaluating his secretary. He Yuan's eyebrows were locked by habit when she conversed with others. It should be said that Luonan had never seen her truly smile and relax. It was as if she was dissatisfied with everything, including herself. Perhaps it was because of this, coupled with her illustrious background, that she always gave people a great sense of oppression. Luonan wasn't a stranger to this feeling. He was normally like this as well. The experiment of restoring his grandfather's notebook had already consumed nearly all of his energy. The abstruse theories and extremely high operating standards made him constantly doubt whether or not everything he did was perfect. Whether or not he met the requirements, the pressure was always there. Naturally, it was hard for him to be happy. It was just that Luonan didn't have an illustrious background, so he couldn't form external oppression and the like. He could only appear more introverted and gloomy. Such a powerful woman lived under pressure all the time. This world was much more difficult than he imagined. Luonan shook his head as he inexplicably felt a bit emotional. He didn't know why he suddenly felt a bit melancholic. A second later, he discovered that the ground beneath his feet seemed to still be shaking. The elevator had already returned to its calm state, so the shaking could only come from the outside. He subconsciously asked, "Another earthquake?" "No. It's just a pointless venting after a failed operation." He Yuan actually responded. She then pressed the elevator's floor button and selected the 81st floor. The elevator trembled slightly before returning to normal. It slowly started to ascend. Luonan reminded, "Zhang Yingying is still on the 27th floor. She's already been called up." Luonan blinked his eyes. He was already unable to make sense of the society's arrangements and corresponding logic. Zhang Yingying, that unreliable woman, had said a few words that were filled with misleading information. And no matter how he looked at it, He Yuan was much more serious than Zhang Yingying. Can you tell me what's going on right now? I remember that I only came here to participate in the entrance assessment. He Yuan raised her head to look at him. Assessment? Luonan felt no pressure selling Zhang Yingying. I just submitted my application to join the society this morning. Then Zhang Yingying notified me to come here to participate in the assessment, and I've already passed. Then you guys told me that the Darksider life form called the human-faced arachnid is wreaking havoc right now. The society really needs psychics. They even gave me a secretary. There's nothing wrong with the above, right? He Yuan frowned in response. You only learned about the human-faced arachnid when you arrived at the hotel? What's the specific content of the operation? Content? Luonan was stupefied. Then he discovered that he seemed to have sold out Zhang Yingying in an instant. Sold out well. Luonan had a whole new understanding of Zhang Yingying's degree of unreliability in an instant. He Yuan shook her head. Even if I told you the content, it would be meaningless. It's a complete mess. Was she talking about the society? Right when Luonan was bewildered, He Yuan sent him a message through the hexaear. Please enter the encrypted channel. Adjust to war chess mode. Luonan moved according to her words, and the translucent interface of his visual membrane opened up once more. At this time, he discovered that 7 or 8 blood-red warnings had appeared in the encrypted wartime communication channel. They all came from He Yuan, and the time was right before and after the incident. And Zhang Yingying had also sent out several messages over the normal communication channel. However, Luonan had been completely engrossed in the human-faced arachnid at the time. He actually didn't notice it at all. He Yuan gave him a reminder at this time. Mr. Luo should pay attention to the hexaear's information as much as possible. Our future communications should be conducted through it to ensure accuracy and efficiency. Okay. But I think I got disconnected just now? He Yuan's eyebrows tightened a bit. It was my negligence. Mr. Luo may be able to realize the third level of communication, but in the end, you aren't unawakened. Once you enter a tense situation, it will be very hard to balance everything. I hope that Mr. Luo can take a certain amount of time to do emergency training to avoid a situation where your communications are disconnected. We can start tomorrow and plan out the time to proceed. Luonan didn't respond immediately because the structural diagram of the Limestone Water Village pub had already appeared on his retina. There was an eye-catching moving logo on it. Chapter 70. A Genius in 1 Second. Remember Love? SpeakNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. The Limestone Water Village Hotel was not a standalone building. Even though it was 454 meters tall and had 108 floors, it could only exist as a secondary building to the entire Cloud City Water Village complex. Moreover, it was the one with the lowest height. There were a total of 6 buildings similar to the Limestone Water Village Hotel. They were distributed in a ring shape, rising one after the other. They surrounded the 1179-meter-tall main building of Cloud City, forming what could be called a first-rate complex of buildings in the entire world. Luonan saw a structural map that included the entirety of the Limestone Water Village Hotel, as well as a few passageways that led to the low-level business center. The meshed perspective map looked like a beehive, but it was 1,000 times more complex. The blue triangular flags representing the Wilderness Explorers Society were scattered within. It was as if they were rushing through a maze. Luonan blurted out when he saw this scene, "There are too few people." The 108-floor Limestone Water Village Hotel was the most affordable and friendly building within the Cloud City Water Village complex. Naturally, its popularity was high. It was the weekend and it was the peak of the night. There were at least a dozen banquets lined up. Adding in the tourists and travelers, 20 to 30,000 people wasn't too much. However, there were no more than 15 aptitude users scattered on each floor. On average, one person had to take care of 7 or 8 floors. In reality, there were a few groups of people, including the 2 of them in the elevator right now. In terms of coverage, it was simply riddled with holes. Luonan had always heard about operations and whatnot. He thought that the society would be mobilizing in large numbers in order to hunt and kill the human-faced arachnid, laying down an inescapable net. But when he saw this scene, he felt a bit embarrassed. At this time, he remembered a small detail. "I remember you brought 4 people with you, Sister He?" Luonan was too embarrassed to call her secretary He, so he learned from Chen Weikan. "That's the one with the 4 of them together." Luonan was already completely convinced. Wasn't chasing after the human-faced arachnid like finding a needle in a haystack with this kind of configuration? He Wayne suddenly asked him at this time, "Can we switch to conference mode?" Luonan believed that she had other plans, so he naturally had no reason to refuse. Soon, a notification flashed on his retina interface. The wartime encrypted communications had entered conference mode. A row of avatars appeared on the interface. All 15 members of the association in the Limestone Water Village pub were online. Zhang Yingying's squirrel was among them. But contrary to his expectations, He Yuan's following words were clearly a response to his question. The number of people isn't a crucial factor. After all, the hidden resources under the control of the society are quite considerable. Moreover, 3 to 5 awakened working together is more than enough to surround and kill a human-faced arachnid clone if the allocation is proper. He Yuan naturally had the qualifications to speak these words as the powerful person who had directly repelled the human-faced arachnid. Luonan didn't have any objections, but he didn't say it in the private channel. He would only say it in public. "Sister He, what in the world were you thinking?" He Yuan's voice was piercingly cold and solemn. She didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Since there are so few people, it's impossible to form a complete coverage. There's no need to spread out, especially when the command and deployment is far from reaching a level of finesse. This was firing cannons. Luonan was stunned speechless when another voice jumped out from the hexaear as expected. "Oh, people from the military are different. Then how do we command and how do we deploy? Secretary He, give us a proper explanation." Impatience seeped through the oily tone. A flashing notification appeared in the corner of the retina interface. The number was 3393. The avatar was an ugly black beetle. Love Go Small Say, Netkuhi Wayne didn't follow the rhythm of the black beetle. She just adjusted the building's structure diagram and opened up a split-screen interface in the lower right corner. It displayed a surveillance image of the hotel's interior. Luonan noticed that most of the faces on the screen were students. Looking at the scale and shape, it was the scene of the mutual assistance cold dinner party that he had yet to enter. He Yuan quickly made a mark on the screen. One was located at the edge of the surveillance area. They were talking to a man and a woman, Shuelei and Chen Xiaolin. The other was standing parallel to them. The black-suited male was getting closer and closer. Clearly, this was the image from before the incident. Luonan could see that Shuelei and Chen Xiaolin had quarreled. They probably had misgivings about being in a public place. After quarreling for a few sentences, they left. They probably wanted to find a quiet place to talk. The black-suited male followed behind them the entire time. Then the surveillance image switched to the elevator entrance. Luonan, who was drawing with his head lowered, entered the frame. Of course, there was also Zhang Yingying, who was watching from the side. Please pay attention to everyone's position at this moment. He Yuan's piercingly cold voice rang out. According to Zhang Yingying's description and the display of the war chess mode, Mr. Luo discovered the abnormality on his friend's body at this moment. He gave a warning and was ambushed by the Black Wolf behind him. Black Wolf? Luonan's gaze turned to the black-suited male on the ground. So this person had a code name? Speaking of which, this person was much more miserable than Shuele. Hiyuan's attack just now had directly smashed his spine. Luonan didn't know if he could be saved. But Hiyuan's explanation immediately stunned Luonan. Black Wolf is a registered member of the society. He is also a member of this search and capture operation. However, right now he is already a slave of the human-faced arachnid. Hiyuan's tone was tranquil. She didn't have any other emotions because of the change in her companion's position. But the conference channel was a sheet of silence. Clearly, this fact made the others rather embarrassed. Hiyuan's analysis continued at this time. We haven't found the scene of Black Wolf being infected. But according to the time of the last call, it was approximately 20 minutes ago. Then, the infected Black Wolf approached the next target. From the state of his target, we have reason to believe that he has already used his methods. He has been tailing them all the way, waiting for an opportunity to reap the fruits of battle. The human-faced arachnid's methods are crude and intense. There is practically no buffer time in between. And right now, we still don't know anything. Only Hiyuan's voice remained in the conference channel for the time being. Only when Mr. Luo captured the traces of the human-faced arachnid and issued a warning to his friend, did we begin to move. The first wave was Zhang Yingying, who was by Mr. Luo's side. The elevator just happened to arrive at the 81st floor with a ding. There were no disturbances in between. Presumably, it was the result of special control. Luonan was startled when the elevator door opened. On the opposite wall was a beautiful woman with drooping shoulders against the wall. Wasn't that Zhang Yingying? This young woman, who had always radiated with vitality, was clearly receiving information from the conference channel. She had a premonition of the unpleasant evaluation that would follow. She raised her hand weakly. Hi. I'm here. Chapter 71. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? SpeakNet provides you with wonderful novels to read. Aside from Zhang Yingying, Hiyuan's 4 subordinates were also present. They were responsible for moving the 3 unconscious people out of the elevator and settling them down. Hiyuan's footsteps did not stop. She gestured with her hand, inviting Luonan to the society's reserved conference room. Zhang Yingying was basically ignored, but she was exceptionally obedient. She called out to Luonan and followed by the side without a word. She received the analysis and criticism from the Hexaeer. However, Hiyuan did not completely reject her. Zhang Yingying's first reaction was passable. Things happened suddenly, but she was still able to discover the abnormality of the Black Wolf and intervene. However, her biggest problem was that her attack power was severely lacking. She was unable to stop the Black Wolf from continuing to harm Mr. Luo. In fact, if Mr. Luo's friend was not an outstanding martial artist, he would be able to rely on his powerful willpower and blood energy to break away from the human-faced arachnid's further corrosion. Mr. Luo would not have been able to survive the pincer attack. Zhang Yingying's expression did not turn for the better even though she heard the evaluation. Instead, she became more gloomy. She was even a bit distracted. The group of people entered the conference room. The conference room was empty right now. There were only a few monitoring devices installed in a messy manner. Hiyuan didn't even give them a glance. She invited Luonan to sit down and continued to analyze the relevant problems. Since all communication was carried out on the psychic wave network, the plane of reality was still a sheet of silence after they sat down. The atmosphere continued to be tense. The worst problem appeared in the second wave. First, Zhang Yingying's second reaction was very clumsy. She watched helplessly as Mr. Luo's elevator sank. She wasn't able to make any effective movements, and she wasn't able to follow up in time. Second, the support of the action team, including me, was completely disjointed. It took a full 74 seconds for Mr. Luo to be completely exposed to the threat of the Black Wolf and the human-faced arachnid. We should rejoice. We are still able to analyze the situation around Mr. Luo and not bow 3 times to his corpse. But this result has practically nothing to do with the members of the action team. Still, no one spoke. Yuan's analysis wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but it was an ironclad fact. The clumsy response of the Society's action team was completely exposed. Luonan saw number 3393, the Black Beetle who had voiced his doubts the earliest, directly log off. He exited from the conference mode. It looked like he was an arrogant and unruly fellow. Facing this, Yuan's expression didn't change. She continued, "Compared to the problems exposed during the operation, what I'm most unable to understand is still the arrangement of the plan beforehand. I didn't receive the notification from the association until half an hour before the operation. There was no mission briefing either. As a secretary and a member of the security team, I only saw Mr. Luo's basic information after I arrived at the hotel. The key information was also vague. According to my understanding, Mr. Luo also didn't know anything about the operation team members. Spirit. He's Soul Team. Team. Luo. Team. The members of the operation team fought by themselves. They didn't utilize the abilities of psychic beings at all to realize effective command. Moreover, they placed their focus on the infected, neglecting the human-faced arachnid's ability to move independently. This caused the mission to fail completely. These are some of the problems I've discovered during the operation. But I not. Dong. But I hope everyone can seriously discuss and solve the problems that have been exposed and continue to be exposed. Otherwise, our pursuit of the human-faced arachnid will only lead to continuous failures, leading to unfathomable consequences. Love go little say, net ku over. Yuan's long analysis finally came to an end. No one spoke for a long time in the conference channel. No one responded to her proposal. The atmosphere was awkward. Luonan even thought that if Yuan's words hadn't softened a bit in the end, perhaps more people would have withdrawn like the Black Beetle. He could see that Yuan's strict and serious behavior was a bit out of tune with the Society's overall atmosphere. Luonan thought back to Zhang Yingying's evaluation of ability users this morning. The evaluation of ability users such as arrogant, wild and unruly, eccentric and perverted, and so on. Now it seemed that they weren't particularly exaggerated. At the very least, the evaluation of scattered sand was absolutely realistic. Perhaps this operation would come to an end without any progress? Unexpectedly, Zhang Yingying spoke through the conference channel. "Everyone, we've lost face to this extent. Aren't we afraid of making a public appearance? Tactics are needed to fight a boss. We've really underestimated the enemy by swarming over like a swarm of bees. Let's talk things over together." Zhang Yingying's words were admittedly dispirited. She had the appearance of, "Everyone, come over for a farewell meal," but the effect was actually quite good. In the silent and stiff conference channel there was a chaotic sound. "Sure. Let's go up and discuss tactics. It's good to meet each other. Mr. Luo hasn't said anything yet. Has he been turned into a figurehead by the secretary? He's the vice president. Today's fortune is tomorrow's calamity. Mr. Luo really knows how to play it safe. I heard that he's still quite young? I haven't met the future vice president yet. This isn't a good start. Learning from the military's successful experience isn't bad. Speaking of which, does the vice president play the wilderness? The military has a team in the wilderness, right? The vice president should be an expert. What character does she usually use?" Luonan was speechless. This was clearly a group of wilderness battle squads. They usually played the game 10 days in the wilderness and gathered together. He didn't know who called out to them, but they just rushed over to deal with the human-faced arachnid. They probably thought that this was the same as fighting a boss in a game. Yuan was expressionless towards this. She just sat quietly and waited. He looked at Zhang Yingying again. She was lying on the table after she finished speaking. She continued to act as if there was nothing left to live for. She felt Luonan's gaze and suddenly turned her head. Hey! Draw another picture for me. Huh! Forget it. You don't understand anything. Zhang Yingying buried her head in the crook of her arms. She was in a position where no one could see her, and she became all the more depressed. She knew that He Yuan was very impartial in her evaluation of this entire matter. But the more she was like this, the more she minded. All because of a single sentence. Her attack power was severely lacking ever since she entered the society. Her white rainbow strike had received praise from the big shots of the society. She was known as the most explosive attack power on the awakened level. She had always been proud of this, but the truth was that she hadn't dealt enough damage to Black Wolf at all. If Black Wolf had used a heavy technique on Luonan back then it would be useless to say anything now. Zhang Yingying was a bit absent-minded as she felt the clear and sharp energy flowing through her body. She inexplicably recalled Susan's words from this morning. White rainbow. Is it dull? This was the first time Zhang Yingying had this sort of thought in the past 2 years. It seemed to be a bit different from what her boss had said. Chapter 72. Genius in 1 second. Remember Love Go? SpeakNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Zhang Yingying spoke of a portrait. Though it was without a head or tail, Luonan really did observe her. Frankly speaking, Zhang Yingying had indeed changed, and it was quite big. Her entire essence, energy, and soul had changed. If Luonan were to draw her now, he would absolutely not draw her as a person who seemed to be in a game at all times and possessed an intense desire for victory. The influence of her emotions was actually this big? Mr. Luo. He Yuan sent a message through the hexaear. Please enter the encrypted communication project 001. Okay. Luonan followed the request and entered the project module that was established at the last minute. A simple interface had already been built inside. Luonan was unsure of the concrete contents, but he could see that it was related to him and the human-faced arachnid. Information was constantly being updated right now, changing at every moment. Was this a template that came with the hexaear? Or was it He Yuan who built it herself? If it was the latter, then Luonan could only sigh in admiration at He Yuan's powerful control on the mental plane. Before the meeting, I hope to gather some information to use as a basis for decision-making. Mr. Luo, you don't mind, right? Luonan answered honestly. There are some things that I don't even know how to say. It's fine. It's fine as long as you can provide first-hand information. Back in the elevator, aside from your friend, Shuele. Yes. Aside from Mr. Shui blocking the Black Wolf, you should have created some sort of restriction on the human-faced arachnid. Is that right? Luonan secretly rolled his eyes. How could the first question be so sharp? However, the heavily chained crow that was molded from his grandfather's formatting theory was an open and above-board achievement. Luonan didn't even have the time to publicize it. He didn't have any thoughts of keeping it to himself. What he needed to avoid was his relationship with the human-faced arachnid and his intuition as the trump card of a psychic. That was all. The problem right now was that he couldn't explain it in a short amount of time. So he could only express it rather regretfully. At the time I felt that there was some sort of negative existence in the elevator, so I tried to use the chains to suppress it. Chains? Luonan was waiting for this question. He took a deep breath and expressed it as clearly as he could. This is a format constructed on the mental plane according to my grandfather's theory. Its function is to suppress the abnormal state of the body and mind. He Yuan said curiously, constructing a format on the mental plane? Do you mean the prototype format of formatting theory? Luonan's impassioned mood was instantly doused in cold water. He really wanted to roar in response, screw the archetype format, but he quickly recalled the source of He Yuan's strength in the elevator. Wasn't it the format of fire? Without a doubt, in the heart of a burner like her, Yen Hong's archetype formatting theory was the cornerstone of power. She wouldn't accept anything else. He actually wanted to seriously expound on his grandfather's theory. He was really stupid. Luonan's mood instantly turned gloomy. He didn't have the mood to explain further. He just said, "I don't know what your professional terminology is, but the general meaning is like this. Love go small say, netku. This theory seems very interesting. I hope to have a chance to discuss it with Mr. Luo." He Yuan was like an outstanding presenter. She would never easily deny the opinions of others, yet she always grasped the core theme. Can Mr. Luo describe the feeling of directly confronting the human-faced arachnid? For example, the performance of the human-faced arachnid's abilities? Luonan didn't respond immediately. He needed to sort out the relevant information and protect his own trump card. He needed a certain amount of time. He Yuan wasn't just a questioner and a listener. She felt Luonan's hesitation and she first shared her own experience. Actually, yesterday I joined forces with my comrades to exterminate a human-faced arachnid clone. Today I encountered it again. The difference from yesterday's clone is quite clear. Yesterday? Where? Luonan was a bit surprised. Mr. Luo should know. It's the source of the human-faced arachnid incident, the research and development area. The military transport ship Lan Shan. It's her. That blade light, there's no mistaking it. Luonan's loosened memory barrier opened up like this. He instantly connected the thin woman in front of him with the deep blue walker who had slain the burning wraith on the military transport ship yesterday. The feeling of that blade light was completely compatible. Yes, this was the slayer who had slain the burning wraith that he had subdued. Sure enough, this was a world piled up by coincidences. They could be considered to have a grudge between them. Luonan didn't really care, but the question he had been keeping in his stomach suddenly emerged. Sister, he can activate the format of fire without the deep blue armor? What Luonan really wanted to ask was, why do I feel that the strength you unleashed in the elevator is even stronger than when you're wearing the armor? Unfortunately, this kind of self-exposing question could only be kept in his stomach. He Yuan didn't find it strange that Luonan was certain that she was a deep blue walker. In this world, deep blue walkers and burners had a 1-2-2-1 relationship. The format of fire can already exist without the armor starting from the third generation of burners. After all, technology is constantly advancing. He Yuan didn't explain in depth. Instead, she went back to the original topic. Compared to the one we killed before, this human-faced arachnid clone's ability to interfere with reality has clearly increased. It can forcefully infect and control an awakened like the Black Wolf. It can also quickly extract its strength. If this happened on the ship, it would be very hard for us to successfully surround and kill it. Luonan used the hexaear to flip through the Society's information and combined it with his own personal experience. He didn't feel that there was anything hard to understand. It must have devoured many of its own kind. With 8 or 10 of them piling up together, its ability will naturally increase by a level. He Yuan responded, "The hunt for the human-faced arachnid has just begun. Right now in the entire Xia city, not counting us, there are only 2 successful examples. There are 3 other failures. Even though there isn't any more detailed information, we can see from the briefing that the human-faced arachnid clone we're facing clearly has a strength that's a level higher. Forcefully infecting an awakened is the only case. I didn't mention it just now, but I feel that the most important problem lies in the judgment of intelligence. It is impossible to form an effective chain of information by relying solely on the strength of the Society's psychic. In addition, Quantum Corporation is certainly still holding back. The military and the higher-ups of the Society have already re-entered the R&D area to investigate the scene. I hope to find something new." The sound of a door rang out, interrupting their conversation. Ability users that were spread out on every floor arrived one after another. These people had all sorts of appearances, but they all had one thing in common. They were all quite curious about Luo Nan and He Wen. Zhang Yingying also raised her head, forcing herself to help them introduce. Truthfully speaking, Luo Nan really didn't remember many of them. He only remembered that the black carapace beetle didn't come. It looked like they had truly fallen out. Chapter 73. Genius 1 Second. Remember if you want to go? Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Sweat. I came back later than I expected. Everyone, please forgive me. Since they were all sitting together, He Wen no longer conversed with Luo Nan alone. She began the meeting. He Wen had already established her position in the society through her accomplishment of single-handedly repelling the human-faced arachnid's clone in the elevator. She had analyzed the previous problems. Of course, she had a faint military background. No one expressed any dissatisfaction with her presiding over the meeting, at least on the surface. As for Luo Nan, he was still in the stage where he was being observed. Gazes fell on his face, and all of them were straightforward playfulness and curiosity. There was no concealment whatsoever. Luo Nan was also observing them. If the operation continued, his safety would be greatly affected by these people. Of course, he couldn't be careless. He didn't remember it during the initial introduction, so he could only study it hard during the meeting. Luo Nan really admired his secretary when it came to this. It was only during their introductions that he learned that He Wen had also just retired from the military. She had joined the Wilderness Explorers Association less than a day ago and was a newcomer just like him. But with the same experience, He Wen could clearly remember the names and nicknames of all the participants. There was no hindrance in communicating during the meeting, and she also had a clear understanding of everyone's duty and movement within the hotel. This was not just a matter of memory, but also a matter of whether one was diligent or not. Speaking of meetings, the initial format was quite casual. He Wen didn't walk down one topic after another. Instead, she followed the same pattern of communication she had with Luo Nan. She chatted and gathered information from all sides. Luo Nan didn't exit Project 001, so he could clearly see that the template's contents were being updated and adjusted at lightning speed. The blueprints of the Limestone Water Village pub also became more and more detailed. It could be seen that He Wen was attempting to reverse engineer the movements of the human-faced arachnid. She wanted to see how it would make its move against the black wolf. However, she was unable to see the results at the moment. Luo Nan felt quite familiar with this sort of intuitive deduction method. Love Go Small Say, Netkuhi opened his notebook subconsciously. The flexible e-ink screen was still on the drawing interface. To him, the abstract and precise structure of the wraith sign was particularly eye-catching among the messy lines. The drawing interface stopped at the moment when he sensed the existence of the human-faced arachnid and warned Shuele. Luo Nan was a bit spellbound as he looked at the chaotic lines on the interface. What he could confirm was that he had not truly seen the human-faced arachnid in the instant he had drawn the wraith sign. What had stimulated him was an intense yet fuzzy feeling. It was similar to an incomparably mysterious intuition. Luo Nan was no stranger to this feeling. When he added his drawings, the self-portrait of the prison building, the sketch of the capture of Li Xueqing, they were all pieced together by the details of this intuitive inspiration. If he used Zhang Yingying's description of a shaman as a standard, this was the only ability he could rely on. Bang! Someone in the conference room slammed the table. Luo Nan was also alarmed. He originally thought that it was someone who was dissatisfied with He Wen, but when he raised his head, he discovered that it was actually a group of ability users. They had inexplicably sunk into an argument. It seemed that some problems were triggered as the content of the conversation gradually deepened. In a peaceful state, everyone was smiling, and no difference could be seen. But at this time, almost everyone in the conference room had emotions, but they showed different faces. Some were anxious, some were angry, some were absent-minded, some were disappointed, and some were watching coldly from the sidelines. Luonan felt that this was quite interesting. He took out his digital pen, and the tip of the pen fell down, sketching on the flexible e-ink screen. The originally chaotic lines underwent a bit of embellishment, transforming into a muddy and turbulent river. The structure of the wraith sign was hidden within the tightly woven lines. Then he drew a few sketched fish within these lines. They were either undulating within the waves, leaping out of the water, or diving to the bottom of the river. Their postures and temperaments were all different. They symbolized certain people in the conference room. But there was one thing that was the same. Every fish was bobbing within the river, affected by the waves and the current. Luonan used this to symbolize complex emotions and willpower. Love go small say net connects. Luonan drew a small boat on the surface of the river. The chains and anchors hung down to symbolize himself. Perhaps he was originally a member of the people bobbing within the river, but because of the heavily chained crow, his position was anchored and he was somewhat detached. As for He Wang, her situation was similar to his. As a burner, she possessed the power of the format. She was like a reef in the water. As for the human-faced arachnid, it was a hunter hidden deep within the river. It used negative emotions as a primer, waiting for an opportunity to strike. It could permeate and exert influence on other people, but it could only meet force with force against Luonan and He Wang. This was where his advantage lay. The tip of the pen reached this point, and a line of thought suddenly became clear in Luonan's mind. Picking Black Wolf to make a move shouldn't be a coincidence. How could the human-faced arachnid have the luck to randomly pick an awakened? Luonan thought about Shuele. He was also an excellent resource. His blood and energy were abundant. He was a top-notch tonic. Perhaps the human-faced arachnid had chosen every single person present. It had made contact with every single person, but no one had detected it. Yes, there was a specter like this. It had once floated above everyone's head, and then it had chosen the one it liked the most. It was also the most unlucky one. Just like now, the wraith sign hidden in the turbid river was connected to every fish through the lines that passed through it. Mr. Luo. What? Luonan woke up from his trance with a start and discovered that someone was greeting him. The one who spoke was a tall and skinny young man. His nickname should be Bamboo Pole. He always had a cheeky smile on his face. He looked like an optimist, but his words were very sharp. Mr. Luo's psychic ability, accuracy, and sharpness need not be mentioned. There have already been facts to verify it. Then what's the range of coverage? I heard President He say that we need to create tactics around psychic. Is it close combat or is it long-range bombardment? We need to figure this out, right? Luonan smiled bitterly and looked at Zhang Yingying. She was the one who put the hat on him. She was the one who explained it. Zhang Yingying glared back, but she still opened her mouth. Luonan just joined the society. He doesn't understand anything. He needs to let old you appraise him and give him some pointers. He needs to have a basic concept, but Bamboo Pole was unforgiving. I heard that Mr. Luo's psychic ability is presented in drawings? I've seen you draw and draw all this time. Do you have any inspiration? Oh, not really. Of course Luonan wouldn't say that he was drawing a picture of them and that he felt that they were all going to be swallowed up. Luonan discovered that he was being targeted in response. This group of ability users had enough of quarreling internally. They began to exert their strength externally. He Wang wasn't easy to deal with, so they picked a soft persimmon like him to pinch. When all was said and done, it was because he wasn't convinced. I saw it all. The one who raised her hand and laughed was a woman nicknamed Cat Eyes. She was roughly 30 years old and had a hot figure. She wore heavy makeup and looked like a bar dancer. Luonan had a deep impression of her because her ability was long-range perception. It was already very similar to a psychic. But it wasn't effective against Darksider life forms. She played the role of a scout in the team. Now Luonan had seen it for himself. Separated by the conference table, he was at least 7 to 8 meters away from Cat Eyes. She could even see it? There were already people jeering at this time. Kitty, what did he draw? It's fine if Mr. Luo's face is tender. We can do it ourselves. Yeah. This is the first time I've seen this type. Kitty, you interpret it for us. Cat Eyes was the type who wished for the world to be in chaos. She didn't care about Luo Nan's expression and giggled as she opened her mouth to describe. This drawing has a very messy appearance. It's like a river. There are boats and reefs on the river. There are small fish swimming below, and then? Luo Nan was a bit helpless against this sort of noisy character. He wanted to put away the digital pen, but the pen tip sank a bit. It was as if an invisible thread had wrapped around it. There was a sudden reaction on the mental plane. The chains rattled and trembled. The wraith sign at the front also seemed to flicker with light. Luo Nan subconsciously moved his pen, and a marvelous feeling appeared. It was as if he had brought something with him. Cat Eyes, who had been giggling, suddenly went mute at this moment. Blood seeped out from the corner of her eyes and she fell backwards. Chapter 74. A Genius in 1 Second Remembers Love? SpeakNet provides you with wonderful novels to read. The chairs in the conference room were quite stable. Cat Eyes bumped into the back of the chair, causing it to sway slightly and push her body forward. Her entire body was as soft as a noodle. Clearly, she had completely lost consciousness. She swayed a few more times before finally falling forward. Her forehead bumped into the conference table with a muffled sound. She did not react at all. The tip of the pen in Luo Nan's hand suddenly stopped. Aside from Cat Eyes' strange reaction, countless blurry and chaotic scenes suddenly exploded before his eyes. There were even more peculiar sounds, smells, and other signals. They surged over one after another. This was absolutely not the stimulation of his senses from the external environment. Instead, it was information signals that were directly transferred to his nervous system. There was no logic behind it. There was no distinction between primary and secondary. They just swarmed over like a swarm of bees. Luo Nan was already extremely familiar with how to deal with this enormous amount of information. He did not attempt to analyze it at all. Instead, he directly transmitted it through the heavily chained crow and sent it into the external neuron. Luo Nan was able to understand what this sudden and unforeseen event was all about because he had this familiar scene as a comparison. He had dug out a piece from the body of the human-faced arachnid in the elevator. He had received a large amount of energy and a huge amount of information that could make one's brain stop. Right now in the conference room, the impetuous woman Cat Eyes was using her ability to spy on Luo Nan's creation. Little did she know that this creation was a part of Luo Nan's ability to operate on the mental plane. Frankly speaking, this sort of spying was extremely stupid. Cat Eyes had swapped places with the human-faced arachnid. She took the initiative to deliver herself to Luo Nan's doorstep when Luo Nan's mental plane was the most active. Then, she was pierced through by the heavily chained crow. The chains and the wraith sign dug out a piece from her without a trace of politeness. The contents involved Cat Eyes' most proficient memories of long-range perception. The specific contents would need to be analyzed by the external neuron. Bang! Someone slammed the table when they saw Cat Eyes' miserable appearance. Kid Luo, what the hell are you doing? Bang! Someone beside Luo Nan also slammed the table and stood up. You bunch of idiots! What the hell are you doing when a psychic is working? The one who stood up and roared was Zhang Yingying. Perhaps it was because she had an instinctive protective heart towards the talent she had unearthed herself. She stood up without the slightest hesitation and tore at her friend. Her imposing manner soared to the heavens. When old you burns the turtle shell, why don't you try pouring a basin of water on it? Why don't you try smashing old Gao's altar when he's casting the spell? Try slapping Lao Bai's face when he's in the dream. Even if you don't know about manners, you should at least know about taboos, right? Since when did shamans become someone you can flirt with at any time? After a round of reprimanding, Regardless of whether they were convinced or not, the group of ability users were all dumbfounded. At this moment, Cat Eye's shoulder moved. She began to show signs of regaining consciousness. The people at the side crowded around to take a look. Approximately 5 or 6 seconds passed before Cat Eyes finally regained her wit. She sat up straight with the help of someone. She blinked her eyes and had a blank expression on her face. What happened? Did he lose his memory? Someone stretched out his finger. Kitty, how many is this? Scram. Cat Eye's vitality did not diminish in the slightest as she scratched with her long manicured fingers. She quickly recovered and began to feel annoyed that there were too many people crowding around her. She waved her hand to chase them away. Love go small say, Netku, what happened just now? Give me a clear explanation. How would I know? Cat Eye's voice was sharp and clear when she spoke. But when she looked at Luonan, she clearly felt a bit weak. I was just looking at the painting and feeling the changes in his aura in passing. I wanted to see if this painting was for real or just to scare people. Oh! More than half of the people rolled their eyes. Just looking at the painting was fine. Why did you have to feel his aura? When a psychic was working, the rise and fall of his aura was equivalent to the life and death combat state of a combatant. A single mistake would cause a reversal. Who knew what the consequences would be? Zhang Yingying slammed the table on the spot. Kitty, do you not want to live anymore? Cat Eyes was clearly a bit embarrassed. I was just trying. I was just curious. There are a few psychics in the society. Each and every one of them are hidden like thieves. It's rare to see such an interesting lad. Mr. Luo. He Yueng completely ignored the ruckus of these unreliable people. She noticed that Luonan had not opened his mouth to speak for a long time. Zhang Yingying turned her head when she heard this. She saw Luonan with his half-opened eyes and a stupefied expression. It didn't seem like he was angry. It seemed like he had lost consciousness? Cat Eyes. She no longer affectionately called her Kitty. She directly called her by her full nickname. This proved that Zhang Yingying was truly angry. Luonan is just a rookie. Do you understand? Plus, he's a gifted student, not a systematic student. He doesn't know any taboos. Especially psychics. They can't even protect him in time. Yet you purposely poke him? Do you even have the intelligence of a professional? Whether it was Cat Eyes or the friends by his side, they all knew that they had caused a huge disaster. Each and every one of them shrunk their heads, not uttering a single word. He Yuan pressed against her ears for a moment. She frowned at Zhang Yingying and said, I've been looking for old you. I haven't been able to contact him. He might be in a psychic state. I don't know how to contact Mr. Gao and Mr. Bai. You contact them and ask how to handle this situation. Oh, okay. Zhang Yingying knew that the situation was urgent. She immediately did as she was told. Cough. I'm not a gifted student. I'm a systematic student. A sudden voice rang out. Luonan raised his half-closed eyelids and corrected Zhang Yingying's misunderstanding once more. Zhang Yingying was startled and then overjoyed. She wanted to pat Luonan on the shoulder, but she thought for a bit. In the end, she didn't dare to do so. She just slapped the table in passing. As long as you're fine, you'll be a systematic student in the future. In the future, if anyone is blind enough to dare say that you're a gifted student, I'll chop them in half. As she spoke, her gaze swept across the faces of a few unreliable fellows across from her. Cat Eyes immediately raised her hands in surrender. Yes, I'm a systematic student without a doubt. Even Cat Eyes, the instigator of all this, was kneeling. The others grunted and groaned. They could only tacitly agree to this preposterous classification. Yuan's cold and hard fingers pressed against the side of Luonan's neck. She felt the amount of blood flowing through his aorta. Her other hand gently placed on his forehead. She spoke softly. Are there any symptoms of congestion or ischemia in your brain? Dizziness, blackness in front of your eyes, Luonan shook his head a bit awkwardly. I'm fine. Luonan really was fine. His mind was clear from the very beginning. The reason why he didn't react to the outside world was because his attention was completely focused on the external neuron. Though the two pieces of information that had been dug up could both be described as enormous, the contents of Cat Eye's long-range perception were nothing in comparison. The external neuron was still in the process of analyzing the human-faced arachnid's information. However, Cat Eyes had already finished analyzing the information within a short dozen or so seconds. Luonan's mind stirred slightly and the interface of the flexible e-ink screen appeared on his retina. He noticed that the number of icons on the interface had changed once more.